Imagine for a moment that every choice you believe is yours was actually predetermined long before you even realized you had to decide. What if the sense of control you feel, the freedom to pick, act, or change, is just an illusion crafted by your brain? Science reveals this isn't fantasy, but a harsh truth grounded in biology and psychology. From the moment you were born, layers of influence shaped your thoughts and decisions. Genetics set a baseline. Your childhood molded your values. Culture scripted your beliefs, and neurochemicals subtly directed your impulses. Studies using brain imaging show that neural activity predicting a decision occurs milliseconds before you consciously decide, meaning your brain starts the action before your awareness kicks in. Consider addiction, where chemicals hijack the brain's reward system, narrowing choice until what feels like willpower is actually compulsive reaction. Or think about cultural conditioning, countless behaviors and preferences absorbed unconsciously, dictating your likes, dislikes, even moral judgments. The environment, upbringing, and internal chemistry intertwine so deeply that the you who decides is a storyteller fabricating a coherent narrative from pre-written scripts. This doesn't mean you're powerless, but understanding this setup reframes how we view responsibility, choice, and freedom itself. You are not the sovereign author of your actions, but a complex product of layered causes, navigating a world where the illusion of free will is both a survival tool and a profound mystery. Imagine you are standing on a stage, the spotlight shining bright, convinced you are the playwright shaping every line, every action. But what if all you are is the actor, reciting a script written long before you took the stage? Scientific studies show that much of our behavior is governed not by conscious choice, but by deeply ingrained memory patterns, habits, and unconscious fears masquerading as confidence. Neuroscience reveals that our brain often acts on autopilot, relying on neural pathways forged through repetition. This means what you perceive as free will is often just the replay of established routines, the echoes of past experiences shaping every decision. Psychological experiments demonstrate how much of our spontaneous behavior is pre-decided milliseconds before we are even aware of making a choice. For example, the famous Libet experiment shows brain activity initiating actions before conscious intention arises. We are actors on a stage, performing scripts etched by upbringing, culture, and biology, scripts we rarely see, let alone write ourselves. Our self-confidence. Sometimes it is just the voice of fear, rehearsed so often it feels like our own. The real challenge lies in recognizing this scripted reality and questioning which lines we want to keep and which to rewrite. Because only when we become aware of the hidden playwrights, our subconscious and conditioned mind, can we start to improvise, reclaiming true agency from the shadows of habit. Imagine you're standing at a crossroads, convinced you're about to make a fresh choice, maybe a new relationship, a different job, or simply a change in behavior. But as days pass, patterns emerge. You pick the same type of person, fall into the same kind of job, or repeat the same mistake. It feels like freedom, but it's actually a loop, a pre-programmed orbit shaped by your past experiences, your brain's wiring, and the comfort zones built around trauma and familiarity. Science tells us that our brains crave familiarity because it conserves energy and avoids risk. Neural pathways formed through repeated behaviors become stronger, while unfamiliar paths require effort and uncertainty. Psychologists call this phenomenon the choice loop, where we unconsciously recreate patterns because they feel safe, even if they bring pain or failure. This cycle is reinforced by implicit memories stored in our subconscious, influencing decisions before we even realize it. Take the example of someone who repeatedly chooses partners who mirror a childhood trauma, someone distant or neglectful. Their brain's early programming unconsciously seeks what it knows, mistaking familiarity for security. Or consider the person who keeps changing jobs but ends up in similar roles, driven by deeply ingrained beliefs about their capabilities or worth. Breaking this loop demands awareness, recognizing these hidden influences, and courage to forge new neural pathways. Therapy, mindfulness, and deliberate exposure to novelty help rewire the brain, allowing true choice beyond automatic repetition. So, next time you think you're choosing freely, pause. Are you stepping into new territory or orbiting an old familiar pattern? Imagine sitting at a table, debating whether to eat that slice of cake or skip it. You think it's a choice driven by your will, your reason. But beneath your awareness, a silent chemical symphony has already whispered its verdict. Your blood sugar dips, triggering the release of ghrelin, the hormone of hunger, pushing your body toward that sugary comfort. Your brain's reward system, flooded with dopamine, nudges you closer to that decision, not because you willed it, but because your body's chemistry dictated it first. Decisions, no matter how personal they feel, are often predetermined by physiological signals. Hormones like cortisol surge in response to stress, narrowing your focus, making you avoid risks or lash out. When you're tired, your glucose levels drop, and the brain's prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational thought, loses power, surrendering control to more primal impulses. Your body's internal state, including hydration, temperature, and gut microbiome, continuously broadcasts subtle signals that guide your choices before you're even conscious of them. Neuroscience shows us that our brain acts as a biochemical machine reacting to the constant flux of molecules, chemicals, and signals. Free will becomes an illusion. When the balance of neurotransmitters sways decisions long before they reach awareness, your mind might feel like the author of your actions, but in truth, it's a biological orchestra performing under chemical conductors, determining your yes or no silently, invisibly, inevitably. Imagine this. Every choice you think you make freely is actually a whisper from your ancestors encoded deep inside your DNA. You might believe your actions are spontaneous, born purely from your conscious mind, but in truth, you're carrying a survival algorithm forged over millennia. These ancient genetic patterns guide your instincts, preferences, and reactions, pushing you toward decisions that once ensured your ancestors' survival. Whether it's a sudden fear, a craving, or even who you trust, it's your DNA's hidden script influencing your behavior beneath the surface. The deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. You're not just your thoughts, you're a living echo of countless generations, with every spontaneous act shaped by forgotten genes. Imagine staring into a mirror and realizing that the reflection isn't just your face, but a replay of everything you despise, admire, and absorbed from your past. This is the mirror repetition law, the unsettling truth that much of who you are is a reflection of what you have experienced, often unconsciously repeated. Our brains are wired to mimic, to imitate behaviors, emotions, and patterns from those around us. From childhood, the people who raised you engraved habits and beliefs deep inside your neural pathways. These imprints become automatic, shaping reactions without conscious choice. You mimic the love you received and the pain you endured, sometimes perpetuating cycles of dysfunction without realizing it. Psychological research shows that people often replicate behaviors they once hated, trapped in an endless loop of reenacting the familiar. This mimicry isn't rebellion or free will, it's a biological echo, a survival mechanism encoded in mirror neurons that helps us learn social cues but also traps us in inherited patterns. Cultural and familial conditioning add layers, values, prejudices, fears that you may believe are your own, but are actually borrowed scripts. The illusion of freedom fades as we recognize how deeply imitation governs us, collapsing the notion that our choices emerge from pure independence. Instead, free will is overwhelmed by the weight of unconscious repetition, forcing us to question, are we truly creators of our destiny, or just reflections endlessly cycling through time? Imagine waking up one day to realize the map you've been following all your life wasn't drawn by you. Every value, belief, and preference you hold, etched deep within, is a trail someone else paved long before you took your first step. Our minds are sculpted by culture, family, education, and countless invisible influences, We think we choose freely, but science reveals we often inherit mental blueprints written by others. Studies in social psychology show how norms, authority, and early experiences mold our sense of right and wrong, success and failure. Even our desires and fears trace back to these unseen cartographers. You believe your tastes are uniquely yours, yet brain imaging exposes how exposure shapes neural pathways, guiding your preferences subconsciously. The philosopher Michel Foucault called this disciplinary power, where society designs the roads of thought, subtly steering your direction. We walk what feels like free paths, unaware the boundaries and signposts were set before our time. This revelation is not defeat, it's awakening. Understanding the map's origin lets you question which routes serve your true self and which were handed down unexamined. Only by stepping off inherited trails can you start drawing your own, reclaiming the journey meant solely for you. Imagine a child at age 7, absorbing the world like a sponge. Family, environment, experiences, all shaping an invisible container that will hold their personality. Neuroscience shows us that by this age, key neural pathways are largely formed, creating a framework for how we perceive, react, and even think. This childhood container sets boundaries. Everything that happens after is like painting within its lines, adding shades and details, but rarely changing the original shape. Our brain's plasticity is highest in early childhood, meaning those first years are critical for emotional, cognitive, and social development. Traumatic or nurturing experiences hardwire lasting patterns of attachment, self-esteem, and behavior. For example, a child growing up in a secure, loving environment often develops resilience and trust, while one exposed to neglect or unpredictability might build walls of anxiety and caution. As adults, we might believe we've reinvented ourselves, but psychology reveals that many reactions, our fears, relationship styles, and even career choices, are echoes of this foundational mold. Therapy and self-awareness can help us recognize when we're stuck coloring within old lines and slowly begin the delicate work of redrawing parts of that container. Yet the roots laid down before age 7 remain powerful anchors, silently guiding the colors we choose every day. Imagine waking up in a game already in progress, a world set with rules, challenges, and characters you never chose. You didn't pick your parents, your brain's wiring, or the era you were born into. Yet somehow, you believe you're the player holding the controller, deciding every move. In reality, you've been dropped mid-level, navigating a complex scenario scripted by genetics, culture, and circumstance. Your brain's architecture, shaped by DNA and early experiences, sets boundaries on how you perceive and react. Cognitive biases, emotional patterns, and learned behaviors act like invisible game mechanics steering your decisions. Historical context imposes constraints too. Social norms, technology, language, framing what's possible in your life. Science shows our sense of agency is a carefully constructed illusion. Neuroscientists find that brain activity predicting decisions fires milliseconds before you even become aware of choosing. Your consciousness is more observer than initiator, reacting to processes already underway. Like a player in a game already running, you respond to the hand dealt, rarely rewriting the code. Understanding this isn't defeat, but clarity. It reveals how deeply embedded forces, biology, environment, history, shape who we are. The real power lies not in pretending we control the game, but in learning its rules and navigating with awareness, embracing the mystery of being a player unaware they never pressed start. Imagine standing at a critical crossroads, ready to quit a lifelong dream, lash out in sudden anger, or confess a secret you once vowed to keep, and feeling sure it was your conscious choice. But modern neuroscience reveals a shocking truth. Before your rational mind can even process these moments, your emotions have already hijacked control. This is the mood override phenomenon. Deep within your brain, serotonin, a neurotransmitter crucial for mood regulation, impulse control, and emotional balance, ebbs and flows constantly. When serotonin levels dip, even slightly, they set off a cascade of neural events that suppress your prefrontal cortex, the brain's seat of reasoning and self-control, while activating emotional centers like the amygdala. This biochemical switch flips you into emotional overdrive, overriding your conscious will. Suddenly, quitting feels unavoidable. Anger explodes uncontrollably, and confessions become impossible to resist. Clinical research shows prisoners with serotonin deficiencies exhibit increased violent behavior, while people with depression struggle against paralyzing hopelessness, even when they desperately want to persevere. Even moments of bravery or vulnerability, like revealing a hidden truth, may be dictated more by these unseen chemical currents than by free will. This silent, invisible puppeteer inside your brain means your choices are often not yours at all. So next time you think you chose to quit, fight, or confess, remember, it might have been serotonin whispering orders, steering your fate from the shadows of your mind. Imagine that moment when your gut screams a warning, a feeling so vivid it feels like destiny whispering secrets only you can hear. But what if that inner compass is not some divine signal, but a tangled mix of bias, trauma, and instinct shaped by your past? Science shows that what we call intuition is often the brain's rapid-fire pattern recognition based on memory and emotion, not mystical insight. Your experiences, especially painful or fearful ones, create neural shortcuts that bias how you interpret present moments, filtering reality through a warped lens. Trauma, stored deep in the subconscious, can hijack this system, turning instincts into echoes of past danger, even when none exist. Cognitive biases like confirmation bias and availability heuristics further twist your gut feelings, making you notice what fits your fears or hopes and ignore the rest. This miscalibrated signal masquerades as clarity, but is often just your mind replaying old scripts, blending emotion with flawed memories. Understanding this doesn't diminish intuition, but reframes it as a biological survival tool, one that must be examined, questioned, and recalibrated. Your gut feeling is less a mystical guide and more an echo chamber of your personal history, a reminder that true clarity comes from awareness, not blind trust in internal noise. Imagine facing danger so overwhelming that your body shuts down, not by choice, but by an ancient instinct wired deep within your nervous system. When threatened, humans don't just fight or flee, sometimes we freeze. This freeze response is a primal survival mechanism, conserved across millions of years, encoded in our brainstem and autonomic nervous system. Neuroscience shows that when fear overwhelms, the freeze reflex can hijack conscious will, leaving you paralyzed, silent, or retreating inward without volition. Studies reveal this reaction is automatic, triggered before the mind fully processes the threat. Psychologists call it tonic immobility, a state observed not only in humans, but in many animals as a last-ditch effort to avoid harm. You might think you chose silence or stillness, but in truth, your body dictated those moves long before your mind could decide. Trauma science explains why freeze responses can persist, imprinting fear patterns that resurface even in safe environments. The chilling question is, how much of your will to act or stay silent is truly yours? And how much is ancient circuitry replaying itself through you? Recognizing this can help reclaim control, transforming automatic survival into conscious response. Imagine surrendering completely to the moment, losing yourself in a task, a passion, or a state of flow. It feels like freedom, pure and unbounded, as if you're breaking free from all limits. But neuroscience reveals a deeper truth. This flow is not escape. It's submission to a specific set of constraints finely tuned by your brain. The flow state, first described by psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, arises when your skills perfectly match the challenge before you. Your brain filters out distractions, focusing intensely on what's immediate and manageable. This narrow focus feels liberating, but it's actually your mind working within a tightly controlled framework, balancing challenge and ability to keep you engaged. This submission to constraints is a survival mechanism. It prevents overwhelm, controls anxiety, and channels energy productively. Athletes, Artists and thinkers enter flow by yielding to these boundaries, not by breaking free from them. The paradox is clear. True freedom isn't about escaping limits, but learning to dance within them. So next time you lose yourself in flow, remember, it's not a flight from reality, but a powerful alignment with structure. The feeling of freedom comes from mastering the boundaries, not erasing them. Imagine reaching for vanilla ice cream and believing it's your pure personal choice. But what if that preference wasn't really yours? It's a trap, a carefully woven pattern shaped by countless invisible threads, childhood memories, advertisements, the subtle approval of peers, and cultural conditioning. You didn't consciously choose that desire. It grew quietly inside you, like a seed planted long before you were aware. Psychologists call this the preference illusion. Our brains are primed to absorb environmental cues from birth. What tastes are praised, what smells comfort, what colors attract. These inputs wire our subconscious, forming preferences that feel innate but are really learned behaviors. Ads bombard us daily with images and messages designed to trigger cravings, shaping what we want without us noticing. Even parents and peers influence our likes and dislikes by modeling behavior, rewarding certain choices, or simply sharing cultural norms. Over time, these tiny nudges accumulate until your preference is no longer a choice but a conditioned response. Neuroscience reveals that desire and preference arise from complex chemical interactions. Dopamine spikes when anticipating rewards tied to learned associations. Free will feels real, but beneath it lies a network of invisible forces orchestrating what you think you want. The trap is believing your tastes are purely yours, when they are, in fact, crafted by the world around you. Imagine this. You stayed in a relationship not because you consciously chose to, but because deep within your brain, a powerful instinct took control. This is the repair instinct override, a neural reflex born from your past, compelling you to complete unfinished emotional cycles. Your mind craves closure, not just for the present, but for wounds long ago left unresolved. This urge isn't about willpower or rational decision. It's an ancient survival mechanism wired to fix what was broken before, to heal ancestral pain through repetition. Whether it's staying to mend, forgive, or endure, your brain replays these unresolved stories, driving you to repair patterns rooted deep in your history. What feels like your choice is often just the echo of past neural loops pulling you back into the same narrative, trying to find balance and resolution where none was ever given. Understanding this override reveals how much of your relationship decisions are subconscious attempts to heal what was never truly whole. Imagine standing before an endless hallway, believing every door leads somewhere new, every choice open, and yours to claim. Yet what if most of those doors were never there to begin with, built by others' limits, society's rules, or your own unseen boundaries? This is the reality behind the option wall. The illusion that you have infinite freedom, when in truth, your choices are confined by circumstances often beyond your control. Science and psychology reveal how environment, upbringing, and social structures carve paths that feel like options but are actually preset routes. Economic status, cultural norms, education, and even early experiences gatekeep which doors appear. The brain itself favors familiar routes, pruning possibilities to reduce cognitive overload. When you feel stuck, it's easy to blame yourself, but many missed opportunities were never genuine openings. They were shadows cast by invisible walls of limitation, systemic, psychological, and biological. Recognizing this reframes freedom not as boundless choice, but as navigating within constraints, adapting where you can, and redefining what it means to open a door. The option wall reminds us that true agency often begins by seeing which doors were never built and demanding new paths carved from old walls. Imagine trying to break free from a habit, craving, or addiction, yet feeling powerless despite your strongest intentions. You tell yourself, "I want to stop," but your body and mind resist fiercely. This isn't weakness or moral failing. It's proof that willpower can be overridden by the brain's deep craving circuits. Neuroscience reveals addiction hijacks the brain's reward system, flooding it with dopamine and rewiring pathways to prioritize desire over reason. Studies show cravings activate the nucleus accumbens and limbic system, ancient regions governing pleasure and survival, making desire overwhelmingly stronger than conscious intention. Even when the prefrontal cortex, the seat of self-control, urges restraint, these primal urges can drown out rational thought. The cycle repeats because the brain learns to expect and crave the substance or behavior, turning craving into an almost automatic override. This battle between craving and willpower explains why relapse is common, not failure. Understanding addiction as a neurological override frees us from self-blame and highlights the need for compassionate approaches. The path to freedom lies not just in will, but in rewiring desire itself, reclaiming control from the ancient circuits that hold us hostage. Imagine being trapped in a mental loop, endlessly replaying your worst day, your most painful decision, or a childhood fear that never truly faded. This is not a conscious choice, but a phenomenon known as repetition compulsion, a psychological bias where your mind fixates on unresolved trauma, compulsively reliving it in search of closure. Sigmund Freud first described this in psychoanalysis, observing how people repeat patterns or memories that cause distress driven by an unconscious need to master the experience. Neuroscience today confirms this with insights into how traumatic memories get locked into neural circuits, making them resistant to fading. These circuits replay like a broken record, triggered by reminders or stress, causing anxiety, depression, or compulsive behaviors. Take someone haunted by a childhood rejection. They might find themselves in relationships that mimic that pain, unknowingly trying to rewrite the past. Or a person who made a critical mistake repeatedly obsesses over it, unable to move on. This repetition is the brain's way of trying to process and resolve the unresolved. But without new strategies or support, it keeps looping. Breaking free requires conscious intervention, therapy, mindfulness, or rewriting the narrative with new experiences. Awareness is the first step, recognizing the loop for what it is, not a personal failing, but an automatic brain pattern. Only then can healing begin, and the mind's endless replay turn into forward motion. Imagine looking in the mirror at 7 a.m. and then again at midnight, expecting to see the same you. But science shows that the self you experience is never truly constant. It fragments across time, shaped by shifting biology and states of mind. The will you trust at dawn is not the same will guiding decisions in the dark hours. Your brain's chemistry ebbs and flows throughout the day. Morning cortisol primes alertness and focus, sharpening your ability to plan and decide. By midnight, melatonin rises, fatigue sets in, and the prefrontal cortex, the command center for self-control and reason, loses strength. Suddenly, impulses become louder, and what felt like firm resolve in daylight may dissolve into temptation or doubt. Psychological studies reveal that identity isn't a single fixed point, but a dynamic process, a series of selves that emerge and recede as circumstances and internal states change. Your choices at different times reflect these fluctuating versions of you, each with unique priorities, desires, and fears. This time, fragmentation challenges the illusion of a unified will. It suggests that who you are is a mosaic of moments, stitched together by memory, but divided by biology and time. Understanding this can free you to recognize the fluid nature of self, embracing the changing tides instead of fighting a false ideal of constancy. Imagine you've just made a big decision to improve yourself, to change for the better, to become someone new. It feels like free will, a conscious leap toward growth. But what if that choice wasn't really yours? What if it was your survival system kicking in, working behind the scenes to protect you from breaking down? This is the repairman illusion. Deep inside your brain, countless neural circuits monitor threats to your emotional and physical stability. When those circuits detect damage, whether from stress, trauma, or chronic pain, they trigger change, not because you want it, but because your body and mind refuse to collapse. This urge to change, to fix yourself, is less about free agency and more about a neural reflex designed to keep you alive and functioning. Psychologists and neuroscientists reveal how habits, behaviors, and personality traits evolve as coping mechanisms, often without your conscious awareness. For example, a person who pushes themselves to improve after a crisis is often responding to deep-rooted survival programs aimed at restoring balance and avoiding further harm. Even radical life shifts, like quitting addictions or ending toxic relationships, can be traced back to this innate drive to repair and protect the self. So, next time you celebrate a breakthrough, remember, behind every choice to change lies a survival system working tirelessly to hold you together, not a pure exercise of free will. Imagine looking back on a choice and believing you could have acted differently, that your mind rewinds time and imagines another path. This feeling of regret is powerful, but science shows it's also a trick of memory. Neuroscience reveals that memory isn't a perfect recording. It's a reconstruction shaped by emotions, biases, and current beliefs. The brain edits past events, creating a narrative where free will seems real, but only in hindsight. Psychologists call this hindsight bias, where outcomes feel inevitable and alternative choices clearer after the fact. Our minds fabricate a version of free will, giving us comfort or torment, but never the whole truth. Experiments show people often misremember details to align with current emotions or moral judgments, rewriting their past selves as more or less free than they truly were. This illusion of choice created after the moment is the candle trick of regret, lighting up a path that wasn't visible before, but never really existed. Understanding this can free you from the prison of what if, allowing acceptance of your true nature as a complex interplay of circumstance, biology, and unconscious patterns. Imagine feeling a sudden, irresistible desire, a spark deep in your chest, that convinces you this is what you truly want. But pause for a moment. What if that wish wasn't born from your soul, but planted by unseen forces? Modern neuroscience and psychology reveal how desires can be shaped, even manufactured, by external influences like advertising, social media, and cultural narratives. Marketers engineer cravings through carefully designed images, sounds, and stories that hijack your brain's reward system. Your brain lights up in response, releasing dopamine, making you feel an authentic longing. Yet this longing is often a mirage, a cleverly disguised echo of someone else's agenda. The concept of manufactured desire shows that many choices feel deeply personal, but are in fact scripted by billions spent on influencing human behavior. This spark you believe is your soul's whisper might just be a well-placed seed in a garden tended by corporations. Recognizing this gives you power. It challenges you to question which desires are truly yours, and which are clever illusions designed to steer your path. Only then can you begin to reclaim the authenticity of your wishes, rewriting your inner script from planted roots to self-grown dreams. Imagine stepping onto a roller coaster, convinced you've freely chosen your path, only to realize you never designed the ride. From birth, you've boarded a complex system built from fear, love, approval, and instinctive reactions. Neuroscience reveals our choices are less free than we imagine, heavily shaped by unconscious conditioning and early experiences. Your brain, from infancy, learns to navigate the world based on emotional signals from caregivers. A baby experiencing consistent love and safety develops neural pathways that encourage exploration and trust. Conversely, a child raised in unpredictability or fear builds defensive roots, prioritizing protection over connection. These pathways become our invisible seatbelts, holding us securely but limiting our true freedom. Psychologist John Bowlby's attachment theory vividly demonstrates this. Securely attached children often thrive socially and emotionally, while anxious or avoidant attachments can trap adults in patterns of insecurity or emotional withdrawal. Imagine someone continually seeking validation due to childhood neglect. Their adult life becomes an endless pursuit of approval, mistaking compulsion for choice. Breaking free from this automatic ride demands deep self-awareness and intentional rewiring of these neural pathways. Therapy and mindfulness practices help identify unconscious patterns, gradually loosening that unseen seatbelt you never fastened yourself. Only then can you begin redesigning the ride, stepping beyond reactions shaped by your past toward true, conscious choice. Realizing freedom was never about boarding, but about recognizing the ride you've been on all along. Imagine confidently believing you've crafted your own identity, your ambitions, beliefs, and personality uniquely yours. But what if that belief itself is an illusion? Science reveals our identities aren't original creations, but powerful echoes reverberating from media, mentors, and memories. From the moment we're born, our brains become sponges, absorbing endless cues from the world around us, subtly shaping who we become. Every TV show watched, every teacher admired, every friend trusted, all implant subconscious influences that silently guide our decisions. Psychologists describe this as social mirroring. Humans naturally imitate the behaviors and values they frequently observe. Your personal style, career aspirations, even your deepest convictions may actually be reflections of others rather than genuine self-creations. Neuroscience underscores this echo effect through mirror neurons, brain cells that activate when witnessing someone else's actions or emotions. These neurons make you unconsciously adopt behaviors and attitudes around you, embedding external voices deep within your own thoughts. For instance, choosing a profession might feel like your decision, yet research shows it's significantly influenced by family expectations, media portrayals, and admired role models. We rarely notice this subtle hijacking because it feels intuitive. Our minds mistake repetition and familiarity for authenticity. In reality, your identity isn't a pure internal voice, but an echo loop amplifying outside influences. Recognizing this frees you, providing the crucial insight needed to question these influences deeply and discover what truly resonates as your own authentic voice. Imagine yourself as an arrow, soaring confidently through the air, convinced that you alone determine your path. But consider this. Did you ever choose the bow from which you were released, the strength of the pull, or the target you're racing toward? This illusion that you're steering when you're merely in flight is the essence of the aimed arrow fallacy. Neuroscience reveals a striking truth. Your trajectory in life was significantly shaped long before your conscious mind began choosing directions. Genetics, childhood experiences, cultural conditioning, each plays the unseen role of archer, bow, and target, guiding your decisions invisibly. Studies in behavioral psychology confirm this profound impact. For instance, individuals raised in turbulent environments instinctively gravitate toward chaos, mistaking familiarity for preference, while those nurtured in stability pursue predictable paths, unaware they're following deeply embedded neural scripts. Even your strongest convictions about career, love, and identity can be traced back to subconscious influences and biological predispositions shaped over generations. Brain imaging studies further illustrate how unconscious neural activity precedes conscious decision-making, sometimes by several seconds, indicating decisions form before awareness occurs. The feeling of autonomy is comforting, but misleading, like the arrow believing it directs its flight. So next time you feel certain about your chosen path, pause and reflect. Are you truly steering or simply flying along a course mapped long before you took flight? Understanding this fallacy may free you from false perceptions, inviting humility and deeper self-awareness into your life's journey. Imagine existing at a single point in space and time, bound to one body, one place in the vast universe. Around you stretch infinite paths, choices you didn't take, lives you didn't live, possibilities forever closed. Quantum physics and philosophical inquiry both challenge the idea that you truly chose anything. The many worlds interpretation suggests every decision spawns parallel realities where every option plays out. Yet, your consciousness perceives only one thread, one narrative, trapped like a prisoner within a single timeline. Neuroscience reveals that what feels like choice may be the brain collapsing countless potential futures into one perceived reality. This means your sense of agency is limited, confined by biology and circumstance. The cosmic prison of will confines you to the illusion of control, while infinite other yous live alternate truths. So, can we say you truly chose your path? Or are you simply the outcome of countless unseen forces converging in a moment? This question reframes free will not as absolute freedom, but as the narrow corridor between infinite possibility and singular existence. Imagine reaching for a glass of water. Simple, right? You think you chose it, you moved your hand, you took the sip. But what if that's not the full story? What if your brain had already made the decision, before you were even aware there was a choice to make? This is the delay of awareness, the uncomfortable truth that your consciousness might just be a narrator, not the driver. In the 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet conducted experiments showing that brain activity indicating a decision occurs hundreds of milliseconds before a person reports being aware of making that choice. Since then, countless studies have confirmed it. Your neurons spark the action before you feel the intent. You move, then you explain it. You choose, then your brain backdates the story of control. This delay may seem small, less than a second, but it's massive in terms of what it implies. It suggests that consciousness might not initiate decisions at all. It may just observe them, like a PR team that rushes in after the fact to spin the narrative. I meant to do that, it says, after the action is already set in motion. Neuroscience calls this post-dictive processing. Your brain edits time itself, stitching events together to maintain the illusion of authorship. It doesn't want chaos. It wants coherence. So it backfills your sense of control, crafting a story where you're the star, even if you never called the first shot. Even split-second instincts, pulling your hand from heat, stopping before stepping into traffic, reveal how reaction precedes recognition. Yet your mind insists it was deliberate. Your awareness arrives late but refuses to admit it, clinging to the role of architect. So the next time you feel sure you chose something, pause. Did you choose it? Or did your brain move first, and your awareness arrive just in time to pretend? Imagine believing every decision you make is entirely your own, guided purely by free will. But science reveals you're trapped in perpetual calculation, bound by ancient algorithms of fear and survival. Beneath consciousness, your brain continuously computes risk, reward, and social acceptance, steering your actions far more than you realize. Your mind operates as an intricate machine trained by evolution to prioritize safety. Structures like the amygdala constantly scan for threats, while the prefrontal cortex simulates scenarios, calculating outcomes. These subconscious equations aren't about desire or free choice. They exist solely to minimize danger and maximize security, quietly guiding your decisions. Think about choosing a career. You believe passion directs you, yet neuroscience demonstrates subconscious calculations factor in stability, social prestige, and long-term safety. Even personal relationships and daily choices are governed by these primal computations. The clothes you wear, words you speak, risks you avoid, all result from calculated strategies to maintain security and status. Dopamine reinforces successful calculations, conditioning your brain towards safe, predictable outcomes rather than authentic self-expression. This biological programming profoundly limits autonomy. You're effectively a slave to endless calculations, solving invisible equations of survival deeply embedded in your biology. Recognizing this truth doesn't diminish your humanity. It empowers you to understand the hidden forces silently shaping each seemingly personal choice. Imagine the moment you fell deeply, irreversibly in love. It felt spontaneous, powerful, almost magical. But did you truly choose to fall in love? Or did your brain quietly engineer it, flooding you with a cocktail of chemicals, tricking you into believing it was your decision all along? This phenomenon, the illusion of romantic choice, is profoundly rooted in neuroscience. When your brain identifies a potential partner, a hidden neural mechanism activates, releasing potent hormones like oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin into your bloodstream. Oxytocin, famously called the bonding hormone, creates feelings of attachment and trust. Dopamine fuels excitement, craving, and obsession, while serotonin shifts your mood, making you feel euphoric and blissfully connected. This biochemical flood overrides logical reasoning, pulling you helplessly toward the object of your affection. Studies using brain imaging confirm this. When shown pictures of loved ones, areas associated with reward and addiction illuminate dramatically. Your brain treats love not as a choice, but as a biological imperative, a primal urge ensuring survival through companionship and reproduction. Even qualities you're convinced you prefer, sense of humor, intellect, appearance, are subconsciously evaluated by your brain to ensure genetic compatibility and long-term stability. The heart, romanticized as the seat of love, never actually asked for your permission. Instead, your biology quietly arranged everything behind the scenes, making you feel like the conductor when you're really just a passenger swept up in the neurochemical symphony. Next time you find yourself hopelessly in love, pause and wonder, was this ever truly my choice? Or did my brain decide long before I ever realized? Imagine the moment when you're tempted to act, to reach out, to make a move, but you pause. You feel a sense of triumph, believing you've consciously resisted a powerful impulse. It seems like self-control, doesn't it? But what if that pause itself isn't your choice at all? Neuroscientific studies reveal that your brain often pre-selects your responses, including the moments when you choose not to act, long before you're consciously aware of them. Think about a simple scenario. Someone insults you publicly. Anger surges. Adrenaline floods your body. Your fists clench. But somehow, you stay calm. You believe it's your strong will resisting the urge to fight back. Yet, your restraint might actually be a deeply ingrained neurological program. Your brain learned early, through societal conditioning and repeated experience, that silence or inaction often ensures survival and social acceptance. The decision to remain still, even when everything inside screams otherwise, isn't always your own. Experiments using advanced brain imaging show that neural pathways involved in restraint activate milliseconds before you're consciously aware of your decision to hold back. You are, in essence, witnessing a play already scripted by your subconscious mind. You feel in control, proud of your calmness under pressure, but the truth is subtler, deeper, and more humbling. In stillness, you're not necessarily choosing. You're following an internal script written by genetics, upbringing, and past traumas. The silent strength you admire within yourself is profound, beautiful, but perhaps not as free as it feels. Even your quietest moments are governed by hidden programs within. Imagine reacting to a moment, convinced it was your choice, your unique decision. But science shows many responses are pre-built patterns, embedded in your brain over years of experience and conditioning. Your nervous system processes stimuli faster than conscious thought, triggering habitual reactions before you even realize. These mental pathways act like software routines, automatic and rehearsed, a delayed echo of earlier programming. Neuroscience reveals that the brain initiates actions milliseconds before your awareness catches up, creating the illusion of free will. Psychology confirms emotional triggers and memories activate these ingrained patterns, shaping responses that feel spontaneous but are anything but. This pattern reaction delay means what you believe is conscious choice is often a replay of old scripts running silently beneath your mind's surface. Yet, awareness is powerful. Recognizing this delay allows you to step back, observe your reactions, and rewrite those scripts. In doing so, you reclaim genuine agency, transforming reflexive echoes into mindful actions. Your present self is not just a passenger, but can become the author of your responses. Imagine waking up, eyes barely open, and instantly reaching for your phone, without even thinking. It feels like a choice, but science reveals something deeper. You've activated an automatic behavioral script. Neuroscientists explain these actions as habits, automatic loops consisting of a cue, routine, and reward. The cue here is waking up. The routine is checking your phone, rewarded by dopamine hits from notifications or social validation. Your brain constructs these scripts to save energy and simplify decisions. Over repeated mornings, reaching for your phone becomes ingrained, executed subconsciously. You're essentially following pre-written instructions from your subconscious mind, reading lines of behavior you didn't consciously author. This unconscious scripting governs much of your daily life, your morning coffee, habitual scrolling, or even emotional reactions. For instance, feeling stressed at work might trigger compulsive social media checks or impulsive snacking, habits deeply embedded through repetition and reward. Breaking free requires intentional intervention. By becoming mindful of cues and deliberately altering your responses, you weaken these scripts. Introducing small changes, like delaying phone checks or choosing alternative morning rituals, helps rewrite automatic patterns. Realizing you're often following hidden scripts isn't disempowering, it's illuminating. It offers a chance to step beyond automatic reactions into mindful, conscious choices, turning scripted behaviors into deliberate acts of awareness. Imagine believing you control your thoughts, that you consciously think, then deliberately act. But what if it's reversed? Science reveals a surprising truth. You don't produce thoughts. Thoughts produce you. They arise spontaneously, bubbling from subconscious depths without your invitation, forcing your conscious mind merely to react, obey, and rationalize afterward. Neuroscience confirms that thoughts emerge from brain networks operating outside your conscious control. The brain constantly integrates hidden memories, sensory inputs, and subconscious biases, automatically forming ideas. Your conscious mind receives these fully formed thoughts only after they've surfaced, creating the illusion that you authored them intentionally. Consider sudden inspirations or anxious worries. Did you deliberately select these thoughts? Likely not. They surfaced spontaneously from subconscious processes triggered by unnoticed cues. Even significant choices, careers, relationships, habits, begin as spontaneous mental impulses. Only afterward does your conscious mind rationalize these ideas, claiming intentional control. Psychological studies repeatedly show our sense of initiating thought is misleading. Functional MRI scans demonstrate brain activity associated with decisions occurs before conscious awareness. You are continuously reacting to thoughts, not consciously generating them. Accepting this transforms your understanding. Thoughts aren't chosen, they're discovered, emerging without invitation. True freedom isn't controlling thoughts, but choosing how you respond to the thoughts that spontaneously arise, guiding your actions consciously. Imagine sitting at a table, confidently believing each button you press controls the lights flashing before you. It feels undeniable. You're causing it. But what if someone else secretly controls those lights, making you only feel in charge? This unsettling experience is known scientifically as the illusion of control. Psychologists have consistently demonstrated that humans cling fiercely to the feeling of being in control, even when they're clearly not. In landmark experiments, participants confidently believed they influenced random events, like predicting coin tosses or manipulating outcomes clearly rigged beforehand. Neuroscience reveals why. The human brain prioritizes the comforting illusion of agency over checking reality itself. Studies using functional MRI scans show our brain's reward centers lighting up when we believe we're controlling outcomes, even if objectively we're powerless. The brain seeks stability through perceived control, fabricating a comforting narrative to avoid anxiety and helplessness. Casinos exploit this illusion brilliantly, designing games that give the appearance of skill or choice, while outcomes are pure chance. Even daily life decisions, like pushing elevator buttons repeatedly, reflect this compulsion. We crave the illusion so intensely that we rarely pause to test if our actions genuinely matter. Next time you feel fully in charge, question: are you genuinely controlling events, or is your brain desperately clinging to an illusion that comforts you more than truth ever could? Imagine you're at a cafe and suddenly lock eyes with a stranger. Instantly, a smile flashes across your face, spontaneous and warm. You feel authentic, genuine. This moment feels like the purest expression of your personality. But was this really your conscious choice? Science suggests these split-second decisions aren't truly decisions at all. They're automatic reflexes, powerful reactions shaped by years of conditioning, biology, and past experiences. Neuroscientists explain this phenomenon through rapid neural processing. In milliseconds, before you even consciously register what's happening, your brain analyzes facial expressions, body language, and context, then triggers your reaction. Your smile isn't a decision. It's an unconscious strategy programmed deeply into your mind by evolution, society, and your personal history. Think of that sudden laugh when you hear a joke or the instant blush when embarrassed. These reactions feel undeniably you, yet they're simply quick-fire neurological responses. A lifetime of social learning has shaped your brain's circuitry, determining exactly how you react, without the luxury of thought. Studies using functional MRI scans reveal that your brain fires responses long before your conscious mind acknowledges them. This lightning-fast processing creates an illusion of choice, convincing you that spontaneous reactions reflect your true self. In reality, these moments expose something deeper. You're experiencing the mind's reflexive autopilot, beautifully disguised as your authentic personality. So, next time you catch yourself smiling without thought, remember, it's less about your conscious choice and more about the silent scripts your brain follows without your permission. Imagine catching yourself just before you act, pausing, deciding to stop. It feels like a triumph of will, a moment of control. But neuroscience reveals a surprising truth. Your brain had to first create the impulse you're now suppressing. Before the conscious stop, there was an unconscious go. Studies using brain imaging and reaction tests show that neural activity to act begins milliseconds before awareness. Then, the brain's inhibitory systems work to halt or redirect that action. This means free will is often a reaction to your own reactions, a secondary control layered atop primal impulses. Psychologists call this the stop signal delay, the gap between impulse generation and suppression. It challenges the idea of instant conscious choice and exposes free will as a dynamic, ongoing negotiation within your mind. You are not simply the originator of actions, but also the regulator, responding to urges your brain already set in motion. Understanding this intricate dance helps us see free will less as a singular moment and more as a continuous interplay, a reaction to your reaction. This awareness opens the door to deeper self-control, where knowing the delay lets you intervene more wisely in your own behaviors. Imagine navigating through life, convinced your vision is clear and unbiased, but in reality, you're moving through a dense internal fog of hidden biases. Psychology reveals that your brain, wired for efficiency, relies on cognitive shortcuts called biases to quickly process information. These biases, confirmation, anchoring, implicit stereotypes, quietly shape your judgments, decisions, and perceptions, creating the illusion of clarity where there is actually distortion. Consider a hiring decision. You think you're objective, but unconsciously favor someone similar to you. Or, in debates, you instinctively seek evidence confirming your beliefs, dismissing opposing views as flawed without fair evaluation. These biases operate silently, clouding judgment while presenting themselves as rational thought. Neuroscience explains these shortcuts as survival tools, simplifying the complexity of constant decision-making. Yet this simplification often skews reality, preventing truly objective analysis. To pierce this fog, self-awareness and critical thinking become essential tools. Actively questioning your assumptions, seeking contradictory viewpoints, and acknowledging internal prejudices helps clear the haze. Real clarity emerges not from denying biases, but from confronting them honestly. Only then can you transition from unconscious reactions shaped by hidden fog into conscious, deliberate, and truly informed choices. Imagine believing you consciously steer your day, each decision intentional, each action chosen. But what if reality operates differently? Science reveals your brain runs mostly on autopilot, powered not by deliberate thought, but by automatic habit. Daily tasks like dressing, driving, eating, scrolling, they're performed effortlessly, without active awareness. Neuroscience shows that nearly half your waking hours are driven by subconscious routines stored in brain structures like the basal ganglia. Repetition creates neural pathways, transforming behaviors into habits executed without thought. Your morning coffee, your drive to work, even your habitual smartphone scrolling all occur automatically, requiring minimal conscious involvement. Willpower rarely intervenes. When it does appear, it's merely a cameo, briefly interrupting routines before fading quickly. Routine behaviors such as brushing teeth, picking clothes, or snacking become habitual scripts that resist conscious alteration. This mental efficiency preserves energy but binds you tightly within repetitive loops, limiting genuine freedom. Psychology underscores the challenge of changing habits precisely because they bypass intentional thought. Modifying diet, exercise, or digital habits demands significant effort, effectively rewriting deeply embedded neural pathways. Understanding habit automation provides profound insight. You're not weak-willed, but efficiently designed. The real power emerges from consciously shaping new habits, actively rewriting your automatic scripts, and reclaiming authentic control over your daily actions. Imagine feeling guilty at the end of a long day, staring at unchecked boxes on a never-ending to-do list. It feels like personal failure, but what if that list was never truly yours? This is the unsettling reality behind the to-do possession trick. Neuroscience and psychology reveal that many of our daily pressures masquerading as purpose aren't chosen consciously, but absorbed subconsciously from our environment. Cultural expectations, family pressures, societal norms, all quietly imprinting themselves onto our brains. The sensation of guilt isn't genuinely yours. It's a cleverly disguised emotional response designed by your brain to enforce compliance with these external demands. Studies show that the human brain deeply internalizes societal expectations, converting external obligations into seemingly personal goals through subconscious reinforcement. We mistake external pressure for internal purpose, creating anxiety and guilt when we inevitably fall short. Consider how strongly you feel compelled to constantly appear productive, ambitious, or busy, rarely questioning if these tasks truly resonate with your deeper self. Cognitive researchers find that tasks we label as urgent or essential often trace back to learned fears of judgment, rejection, or inadequacy, not authentic personal ambitions. Your brain tricks you, transforming imposed duties into perceived self-chosen responsibilities, keeping you endlessly chasing artificial targets. So, next time guilt creeps in, question your to-do list's origin. Ask yourself, is this truly my goal, or am I possessed by external pressures cleverly pretending to be purpose? Recognizing this psychological illusion can finally free you from false guilt, reconnecting you with genuinely meaningful actions rather than empty productivity. Imagine standing in an open space, believing you have limitless directions to choose from, each path a fresh, independent choice. Yet, unseen barriers confine you. You move forward, thinking it's your unique path, but you're simply retracing lines etched deep within your mind. Psychologists call these invisible barriers cognitive frameworks, structures built by your upbringing, culture, and genetics, limiting true freedom. Picture someone repeatedly entering similar relationships, convinced each time it's a fresh start. Yet, they're just bouncing off internal walls defined by past experiences, always confined within familiar shapes. Every decision feels original, but each is subtly guided by a hidden geometric pattern formed over years. Neuroscientific studies highlight how repetitive behaviors reinforce neural pathways, creating mental grooves that become our default routes. The more we travel these routes, the deeper they become, shaping our choices into predictable patterns disguised as free will. Even our boldest adventures rarely escape these subconscious maps. Consider your daily routine or habits. You believe you're freely choosing, yet you're often bouncing along predetermined lines, comfortably familiar boundaries you mistake for exploration. Real freedom demands awareness, recognizing the subtle geometry restricting your choices. Next time you feel you've made an original decision, pause and reflect. Are you truly forging a new path, or merely rediscovering familiar walls within your mind's invisible shape? True freedom isn't simply choosing differently. It's recognizing and consciously reshaping the hidden geometry of your choices. Imagine waking up in a life already scripted, born into a country you didn't pick, given a name not chosen by you, assigned a gender before you could speak, and handed parents you never met until your first breath. These aren't just circumstances, they are the invisible bars of a cage masquerading as freedom. Scientific studies in genetics, sociology, and psychology reveal that so much of who we become is shaped by these uncontrollable origins. Your environment, culture, and biology form the foundation of your identity, steering your thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors long before conscious choice emerges. Even the very concept of free will is limited by the life path assigned at birth, an assignment painted with symbols of freedom like passports and names, yet confining in subtle, profound ways. Philosophers argue this cage creates the illusion of choice, where decisions are influenced by inherited biases and conditioned responses. Recognizing this is not defeat, but awakening, a call to question, to push beyond imposed boundaries. True freedom begins when you see your life path not as a chain, but as a starting point to understand, challenge, and rewrite your story. Imagine you answer the phone with a polite hello, or smile automatically at a stranger. It feels like a conscious act, something you choose. But neuroscience and behavioral psychology say otherwise. Much of what we call choice is actually reflex, sculpted by years of reinforcement, habit, and subtle conditioning. This phenomenon is known as the answer reflex. From childhood, we're rewarded for being agreeable, responsive, and polite. We learn to answer questions, smile when greeted, and avoid conflict, not always because it aligns with who we are, but because it earns approval, avoids punishment, or keeps social harmony intact. Over time, these behaviors solidify into reflexes, activated without conscious thought. Consider how you respond when someone asks, "How are you?" The answer, "I'm good," often spills out before you've even assessed how you truly feel. That isn't expression, it's scripting. Social interactions become rehearsed performances of politeness and conformity, not authentic selfhood. Psychologists note that these patterns help us function socially, but can also distance us from genuine self-expression. The reflex keeps the peace, but at a cost. Your real voice becomes quiet, replaced by rehearsed responses. To reclaim your voice, you must slow down the reflex. Ask yourself, was that response real or just expected? With mindful awareness, you can start replacing reflex with reflection, turning automatic obedience into conscious authenticity. Imagine believing you're a unique mind making spontaneous, free choices. But what if your next decision has already been calculated by marketers, algorithms, and behavioral data? Science now shows you're not a sovereign soul choosing freely, but a probability wave responding to inputs with astonishing predictability. Big data doesn't guess, it observes. Every scroll, click, pause, or purchase becomes a data point in a model that can predict your actions better than your own introspection. These algorithms don't need to know you personally. They only need to match your behavior with statistical twins across millions of data streams. Neuroscience backs this. Studies reveal your brain often decides seconds before you're consciously aware. That moment of choice? It's usually the endpoint of subconscious computation, driven by emotional memory, dopamine feedback, and prior exposure to cues like ads or trends. What feels like agency is often an afterthought, a rationalization of the inevitable. Marketers exploit this illusion. Personalized content isn't random. It's engineered to activate your behavioral triggers. And when you act on them, it feels like your idea. But it wasn't. It was forecast, shaped, and served before you even noticed the urge. The statistical self is not a metaphor. You are a moving cloud of likelihoods responding as expected. But awareness cracks the pattern. Real power begins not when you feel in control, but when you know how predictable you've been and choose to break the forecast. Imagine looking back on your life and seeing a story, a neat timeline of cause and effect, each choice building the next, each moment part of a larger arc. But here's the truth. That story is a myth. This is the narrative glue fallacy. Your brain desperately wants chaos to make sense, so it turns randomness into a story you can live with. Neuroscientific research reveals that memory is not a recording, it's a reconstruction, deeply fragile and easily shaped. Each time you recall an event, your brain rewrites it slightly, smoothing inconsistencies, adding logic and links where none existed. Studies show that people routinely misremember sequences, motivations, and even their own decisions, but believe their recollections are accurate and complete. In one famous experiment, participants asked to explain their choices gave confident reasons, unaware the options had been secretly altered. Their minds invented causality on demand, creating order out of manipulation. This is how your brain uses narrative as glue, binding isolated, messy moments into a coherent arc that feels meaningful. The fallacy hides randomness behind the comforting mask of intention. You didn't choose your path as clearly as memory claims. You stitched it together afterward to preserve a sense of self and purpose. The danger isn't forgetting. It's mistaking fiction for fact, myth for memory, coherence for truth. So next time you look back and believe everything led you perfectly here, stop and ask, is this memory or mythology? Recognizing the narrative glue fallacy doesn't erase your story. It frees you from needing it to always make sense, allowing space for uncertainty and honesty to coexist. Imagine facing a difficult moment, a confrontation, a loss, an opportunity, and reaching instinctively for a response. Maybe you crack a joke, grow silent, get angry, or withdraw. It feels like your reaction, your personality. But what if those tools weren't chosen by you? What if they were handed down by your parents, your trauma, or the praise you learned to chase as a child? From birth, you begin assembling a toolbox not of your own design. If your parents used humor to diffuse tension, you likely learned to do the same. If silence was rewarded, you kept quiet. If anger was the only way to be heard, it became your hammer. These tools are passed on like heirlooms, not consciously, but through repetition, mimicry, and survival instincts deeply encoded over time. Neuroscience shows that repeated emotional responses forge strong neural pathways. These circuits become reinforced with each use until the tool becomes automatic. Over time, your toolbox fills with reflexes, not choices, strategies for safety, not necessarily for truth. And while they feel like personality traits, they're often the echoes of earlier environments still dictating your behavior long after the moment has passed. Think of someone who shuts down in conflict, not because they choose peace, but because years ago, silence kept them safe. Or someone who laughs in discomfort, masking anxiety learned from parents who couldn't handle raw emotion. These aren't conscious choices, they're adaptations, inherited, automatic, and repeated until they feel like identity. So the next time you reach for a familiar tool, before you joke, lash out, or retreat, pause. Ask yourself, is this truly me, or just a reflex passed down from someone else's fear? You didn't choose this toolbox, but now you can decide what belongs in it. Imagine a race where not everyone begins at the same starting line. Some have a clear path paved with advantage, while others start buried beneath obstacles. Privilege isn't just about money. It's the invisible bias that convinces you your success is purely your own choice, not the result of unearned advantage. Sociology and psychology reveal how social structures, family background, education access, and systemic inequality shape opportunities long before conscious effort begins. This starting line bias creates a powerful illusion that you alone carved your path, ignoring the invisible ladders some climb and the walls others face. Studies show people often underestimate how much their environment and inherited advantages contribute to their achievements. This illusion can blind us to inequality and distort notions of merit and fairness. Recognizing starting line bias is essential for true empathy and social change. It reveals that free will operates within frameworks of privilege and constraint, not absolute freedom. Only by acknowledging these hidden starting points can we begin to level the race, rewriting the rules toward genuine equality. Imagine believing your memories are faithful recordings of your past, that when you recall a decision, you're pressing play on an untouched tape. But neuroscience says otherwise. Every time you remember something, you're not playing it back. You're editing it, then saving over the original again and again. This phenomenon is known as memory reconsolidation. Each act of remembering destabilizes the memory, making it briefly malleable. Your brain then rewrites it, influenced by your current beliefs, mood, and environment. The edited version gets stored anew, feeling real, but subtly altered, like a story rehearsed too many times. Think about recalling the moment you quit a job. At first, fear and doubt may dominate the memory, but later, your brain might amplify the courage, minimize the uncertainty, reshape the narrative to align with how you want to see yourself now. And that newer version becomes the one you believe. This matters deeply. We use our memories to justify current choices, yet those memories have already been sculpted by countless replays. You're not basing decisions on pure history, but on emotionally edited flashbacks that evolve to protect or empower your present self. You think memory is a vault, but it's a script editor, rewriting the past to serve the present, then using that rewrite to shape the future. The loop feels logical, but it's built on illusion. Real clarity begins when you stop trusting the replay and start questioning the editor. Imagine writing a letter, poured from the heart, sealed in an envelope, addressed and ready. You walk to the door, but stop. Your hand hovers, your chest tightens, and without knowing why, you turn back. The letter never gets mailed. You tell yourself it was doubt, fear, overthinking. But what if it was something deeper? What if your nervous system sensed danger before your mind could explain it? This is the hidden intelligence of the body, a subconscious surveillance network constantly evaluating threat, risk, and consequence before awareness can catch up. Neuroscience shows that the brain's limbic system, particularly the amygdala, can trigger physiological responses long before the prefrontal cortex, the rational part, gets involved. In experiments, people shown emotional images reacted before they consciously recognized the content. This is how your body protects you, by shutting down actions that could lead to emotional harm. That unmailed letter may not reflect indecision, but a primitive warning system overriding your will. The same instinct can freeze your voice before a confession, your hand before sending a text, your feet before stepping into a room. You think it's hesitation, but it may be your system running silent calculations. What if this breaks me? What if I can't undo it? So next time you wonder why you couldn't follow through, consider this. Maybe it wasn't weakness. Maybe it was wisdom. Your biology sensing danger your mind refused to see. The choice wasn't lost. It was paused by something ancient, waiting until it felt safe enough to let you act. Imagine touching something hot, and your hand jerks away before you even realize what happened. Not a second later, but milliseconds before you're aware. You didn't choose to move. You didn't think, then act. Your body moved first. Welcome to the puppet nervous system. Neuroscience reveals that reflex arcs bypass the conscious brain entirely. Sensory neurons fire, signals shoot through the spinal cord, and muscles react, all before your brain is even notified. This is not limited to pain. Most of your life runs on invisible scripts. Daily motion, posture adjustments, micro-expressions, even emotional responses are controlled by patterns embedded in your nervous system. Your conscious mind often arrives late to its own body. The body moves, the mind narrates. EEG studies show that brain activity linked to a decision begins up to 7 seconds before a person becomes aware of making a choice. So when you feel like you just decided to act, your brain had already begun the action. You're not always the puppeteer. You're often the storyteller of movements already underway. Flinching in an argument, freezing in fear, laughing when anxious, these aren't always choices, but reflexive processes fired off by systems evolved to keep you alive, not necessarily honest. This leads to a sobering realization. How much of what we call us is just a cascade of automatic impulses that we later justify. The illusion of self-governance comforts us, but the truth is stranger. We inhabit a machine that often acts before the self even shows up. So next time you feel in control of your reactions, pause and ask, was that me or just my body, already moving, already deciding? The answer might change how you define choice and how you understand the self that claims to own it. Imagine walking through a city at night, navigating only by the glow of streetlights. You feel free choosing your route, but only among the roads that are lit. The alleys cloaked in shadow, the unmarked paths, they're invisible to you. And so, choice becomes an illusion. You aren't building your path, you're selecting from what was illuminated long before you arrived. Free will didn't construct this city. It just walks the glowing routes laid out in advance. From birth, your surroundings begin turning on those lights. Parents, culture, school, religion, media, each one switches on a few more roads. You're taught what success looks like, what failure feels like, what dreams are valid, what emotions are allowed. Everything you believe to be an option was shown to you under a spotlight. A child raised in silence learns to walk quietly. One raised in chaos learns to dodge instead of dream. One raised with praise may follow only what gets applause. Neuroscience reveals that exposure and repetition create deeply rooted neural pathways, defining what feels familiar, safe, or even possible. The more a route is walked, especially with reward or survival, the more it glows in the mind. Eventually, you don't question the path, you simply follow the light. You call it destiny or choice, but it's often neither. Think about it. When was the last time you truly considered an option you weren't already trained to see? A career, a belief, a relationship? How many of those were chosen in darkness, not simply picked from what society handed you in neon? True freedom begins not with walking the lit path, but with stopping and asking who lit it, and whether you dare to wander into the unlit streets and draw your own map from scratch. Imagine believing you consciously let yourself fall apart, give in, or lose control. But science tells a different story. Your body and brain often act first, and your conscious choice follows like an afterthought. Behind the scenes, complex neural circuits and hormonal systems respond to triggers, fear, fatigue, or the relentless pressure of time. These act as unlock switches, initiating changes in behavior or mood long before you become aware. Neuroscientific research reveals how these hidden systems activate survival or surrender modes involuntarily. Your feeling of permission to change or give up is often a post hoc story your mind tells to explain what already happened. Psychologists call this phenomenon post hoc rationalization, where consciousness justifies actions after the fact, crafting an illusion of control. Choice, then, is rarely the initiator, but the final player on a stage set by deeper, automatic forces. Understanding the permission myth helps you see when your decisions truly come from you and when they're responses to unseen triggers. With this awareness, you gain power to reclaim control, shifting from reactive surrender to mindful choice. Imagine snapping at someone over something small, a comment, a delay, a minor mistake. It feels sudden, like a momentary loss of control. But in truth, psychology reveals it was never just about that moment. This is the overflow reaction rule. When weeks of unspoken frustration, repressed emotion, and unprocessed stress break loose through a tiny, final crack. Neuroscience shows your brain stores stress, even when you think you've let it go. The amygdala stays sensitive, the nervous system tense, your emotional reservoir quietly filling. Each ignored slight, each swallowed feeling adds to the weight. Then one small event, a missed call, a dismissive tone, becomes the tipping point, releasing not just irritation, but the full flood of everything you've held back. Take the example of someone juggling silent resentment at work or pain in a relationship. A partner forgetting to do the dishes sparks an argument that feels overblown. But it wasn't about the dishes. It was about feeling unseen for weeks. The snap isn't random. It's an inevitable release. Understanding this pattern reframes outbursts not as failures, but as warning signs. Emotional pressure has limits. Instead of bracing for breakdowns, we must create space for regular emotional check-ins. Journaling, therapy, honest conversations, they aren't luxuries, they're maintenance. So the next time you explode, know this: the reaction began long before the moment. It was a dam cracking open. The real question is, what were you holding back and why? Imagine thinking you're making a fresh decision, a clean break from the past. But neuroscience reveals that most choices aren't new at all. What feels like decision-making is usually memory in disguise. You're not deciding, you're remembering and repeating. Your brain is wired to predict, not invent. When you're faced with a familiar situation, your mind doesn't create options from scratch. It searches for a similar past moment, recalls the outcome, and reenacts the action that once worked. The process is efficient, automatic, and largely unconscious. What you think is a choice is often just reflexive playback. Picture a conversation. You pause, then reply carefully. It feels like thought. But beneath that pause, your brain has scanned past conversations, pulled out what avoided conflict or earned praise, and reused the same pattern. It's not new. It's recycled. Memory masked as will. This is the loop back. It explains why habits stick and change resists. The brain prefers repetition over novelty, certainty over risk. Unless disrupted, it loops the most emotionally charged or repeatedly reinforced memory. What you call personality might be nothing more than accumulated echoes. This doesn't reduce your humanity, it exposes its mechanics. To make real change, you must stop mistaking memory for intention. Choose to imagine instead of recall. Otherwise, you'll keep living decisions dressed in new moments, forever calling them your own. Imagine sitting alone, thinking a thought that feels undeniably yours. It arrives in your voice, shaped by your logic, dressed in your language. But pause. Where did it come from? This is the thought ownership lie. You believe your thoughts are your own, but most were installed by trauma, teachers, headlines, heartbreaks. Your brain is a living archive, constantly absorbing patterns, language, and fears from the world around you. Neuroscience shows that thought formation relies heavily on prior neural pathways, many of which were built long before you had the tools to question them. From childhood conditioning to societal messaging, your mental architecture is more inherited than invented. When someone says, "you think too much," what they really mean is, your brain is echoing too many voices, none of which you asked for. Studies in cognitive psychology reveal that our opinions, even our inner voice, are shaped more by exposure than intention. You didn't choose the fear of failure. Someone planted it. You didn't invent that shame. It arrived in silence after judgment. The brain doesn't care where a thought originated. It just wires and repeats. Over time, you decorate those thoughts, polish them, wrap them in logic, and call them your own. But they were never fully yours to begin with. The danger is not in borrowing thoughts. It's in mistaking programming for personality. So next time a thought defines you, stop and ask, is this truly mine? Or is it a scar disguised as a belief, a memory wearing the mask of reason? Imagine a ladder standing tall. You climb rung by rung, struggling, sweating, celebrating each step. Eventually you reach the top, proud of your ascent. But then you pause and look around. The ladder was leaning against one specific wall all along. You never questioned it. You just climbed. The real question isn't how well you climbed, it's who placed the ladder there, and why that wall was the only one visible. From birth, society hands you ladders labeled success, respect, security. Parents urge you to climb towards stability. Schools rank your steps. Culture rewards your progress, so you climb. But the wall you ascend is not always of your choosing. You didn't inspect the landscape. You didn't even know there were other walls. You saw the ladder, so you assumed it must be the right one. Psychologists call this the problem of default paths. Most people follow the structures laid before them, not because they're the best fit, but because they're the most visible, the most praised, the most reinforced. Neuroscience shows that our brain seeks efficiency. It favors familiar routes, repeated rewards, and predictable outcomes. So we climb, not freely, but comfortably, on a path optimized for approval, not authenticity. Think about someone who reaches the top of their career, only to feel strangely empty. Was the climb the real desire, or was it just the only route they were ever shown? Maybe real freedom isn't climbing higher. Maybe it's stepping back, scanning the terrain and asking, what other walls were there? Who built them? And which one, if any, was truly meant for me? Sometimes, the bravest act isn't in how high you climb. It's in choosing where to place the ladder before you begin. Imagine your personality as a blueprint etched deep within your brain, predicting your behaviors with uncanny accuracy. Scientific research shows that personality traits like openness, conscientiousness, and neuroticism can forecast decisions, reactions, and life paths long before you consciously choose them. Psychologists use statistical models to predict behavior based on these traits, often with frightening precision. If your choices align so closely with pre-existing patterns, can your free will truly be free? Neuroscience supports this question, revealing that brain activity linked to personality shapes how you perceive options and weigh decisions. What feels like spontaneous choice may instead be a dance choreographed by your ingrained traits, your own psychological signature guiding every move. This personality constraint suggests that free will might be less about freedom and more about statistical inevitability. The illusion of choice is powerful, but when your traits script your tendencies so reliably, freedom becomes a question of degree rather than absolute. Recognizing this constraint invites deep reflection. Is free will a myth shaped by who you already are, or can awareness break the pattern and carve new paths beyond personality's shadow? Imagine scrolling endlessly, clicking article after article, chasing something new, an idea, a headline, a notification. You think you're seeking knowledge or stimulation, but neuroscience reveals a deeper truth. Your brain is acting like it's in a casino. This is the casino consciousness effect, where novelty becomes the jackpot and your mind keeps pulling the lever, not out of curiosity but for dopamine. Your brain is wired to reward novelty. In our evolutionary past, noticing the new meant survival, new food, new danger, new opportunity. But in the modern world, this mechanism gets hijacked. Every new post, ping, or hot take activates your brain's reward circuitry. Like a slot machine, it delivers unpredictable hits, and unpredictability is the most addictive of all. You're not evaluating what's meaningful, you're reacting to what's shiny. This novelty loop fragments your attention, making it harder to sit with one idea, one emotion, one truth. It's why the outrageous goes viral while the thoughtful goes unread. Your brain isn't broken. It's been trained to chase highs, not depth. Studies show this constant stimulation weakens memory consolidation, shortens attention span, and rewires motivation toward instant gratification. Deep thinking requires resisting that lever, pausing when you want to click, asking why that jackpot idea feels so urgent. Reclaiming focus means stepping away from the spinning lights and returning to quiet, to slowness, to intention. Otherwise, your thoughts aren't truly yours. They're bets placed by a brain chasing dopamine. Imagine believing your choice to be kind came from pure virtue, empathy, principle, or strength of character. But what if that kindness wasn't freedom, but a reaction? A reflex to avoid guilt, a performance shaped by shame, a strategy to win approval. Neuroscience suggests that much of what we call morality is not liberation, but submission. Moral decisions light up the brain's fear and pain centers, areas tied to social threat, rejection, and punishment. When you help someone or stay silent to keep peace, are you truly choosing or obeying an internal leash that tugs you toward safety? You feel righteous, but your brain may be solving for one thing: avoid discomfort. We're conditioned from childhood: be good, get praise, be selfish, feel shame. Over time, morality becomes reflex. You help not because it's right, but because not helping triggers guilt. You apologize not to repair, but to quiet the churn inside. You're rewarded for kindness that fits the mold, kindness shaped by fear of being cast out. Ask yourself, was that good deed a conscious gift or an unconscious trade for relief? How often is your virtue a mask worn to avoid being seen as bad? Morality can be a cage we decorate with ideals. We flap, believing we fly. But it's the leash reacting, not the wings lifting. To be truly moral is not to obey the script, but to tear it up and ask, am I doing this out of alignment or to escape judgment? True ethics begins when you no longer act just to avoid pain, but to live honestly, even when no one's watching. Imagine standing before a locked door labeled temptation. You walk away, proud that you resisted, proud that you said no. But what if the truth is stranger? What if the part of you that could have said yes was never installed? This is the locked door freedom. We believe we're strong when we avoid what others fall into: addiction, infidelity, rage, failure. But often, what we call self-control is simply absence, not effort. Neuroscience reveals that decision-making is not equal across minds. The prefrontal cortex, which governs impulse control and foresight, develops unevenly based on early life experience, trauma exposure, genetics, and even parental stress. If your brain was wired for stability, resisting temptation might not be resistance at all. It might be insulation. Studies in behavioral psychology show that when people are presented with high-risk decisions, some never even register the urge. The door was locked, and they mistook the lock for strength. Meanwhile, others fight daily battles with cravings or anger their brains can barely contain. So, when you feel proud for staying silent in rage, or walking away from addiction, or remaining loyal when others don't, ask yourself, was it choice or configuration? You may not have resisted the fire. You may have never seen the flame. And if someone else burns, perhaps it's not because they're weak, but because they were handed an open door with no tools to close it. Real humility starts when we stop mistaking neurological luck for moral virtue. The locked door didn't test you. It just didn't open. The illusion of moral strength often hides the absence of temptation itself. Imagine standing at a crossroads weighing two choices. One feels noble, impressive, shareable, the kind of decision you'd post about. The other, it's messier, more honest, revealing parts of you that feel raw or shameful. You pick the noble one. It feels like free will. But was it? Or did you just choose what made you look good, even to yourself? This is the trap of shadow avoidance. Carl Jung called the shadow the part of us we hide. Our fears, insecurities, selfish urges, unresolved wounds. Yet real freedom includes the ability to face that shadow, not just avoid it. When your choices are filtered through the need to appear virtuous, you're not choosing freely. You're managing an image, playing a role you've been rehearsing for years. Psychologists know that much of human behavior is driven by the desire to be seen a certain way. We pick careers, partners, even beliefs that align with how we want to be perceived. We self-censor our instincts in favor of applause. Neuroscience shows that reward centers in the brain light up more when others approve of our choices than when we feel genuine inner satisfaction. Validation feels like truth, but it's often just comfort. So when you choose, are you choosing what you truly want, or what shields you from shame? What wins applause, or what embraces uncomfortable truth? Avoiding the shadow feels safe, but it traps you in a loop of curated identity. Every good decision made for appearances pulls you further from your actual self. Freedom isn't always pretty. Sometimes it means choosing the uncomfortable, the misunderstood, the real. Not for applause, not for approval, but because you're done living only in the light and ready to walk through your shadow too. Imagine walking through a doorway where the very frame changes what you see inside. In much the same way a question is asked shapes the answer you give. Cognitive science reveals that framing effects, how information is presented, powerfully influence decisions, often without our awareness. Experiments show people's choices shift dramatically based on wording, context, or emotional cues embedded in questions. This means your freedom to choose is often constrained by invisible frames shaping your perception and judgment. Your mind, wired to seek coherence and meaning, leans heavily on context to interpret options, sometimes overriding pure preference. This doorway framing error challenges the idea that choices emerge from a neutral, independent, free will. Instead, decisions are filtered through contextual lenses crafted by language, culture, and environment. If your answers are shaped before conscious thought even begins, what remains of your freedom? Understanding this effect invites a radical rethinking of autonomy, not as absolute freedom, but as navigation within frames that can be recognized and, sometimes, transcended. The first step to reclaiming choice is awareness of the frames that shape your mind. Imagine sitting in front of a puzzle, trying to complete it, but you've never seen the full picture, and one crucial piece was never included in the box. That's the missing puzzle consent, the unsettling idea that you can't want what you can't imagine. If something was never modeled for you, love without fear, a dream without limits, a life beyond survival, how can you consciously reach for it? Neuroscience shows that the brain constructs desire from what it has experienced. Without exposure, certain ideas don't even register as possibilities. You're not rejecting better outcomes. You literally can't perceive them. It's a perceptual blind spot formed by the absence of emotional, cultural, or cognitive input. Think of someone raised in chaos. Peace may feel boring, even wrong. Or someone never shown healthy relationships. They may mistake intensity for intimacy because that's the only model they know. These aren't bad choices. They're limited ones. The missing piece isn't effort. It's imagination blocked by experience. But here's the truth. The missing piece can be found. Books, therapy, conversations, even art can reveal new ways of being. They hand you glimpses of the picture you never saw, expanding your map of what's possible. You can't fully consent to a life when the options were never laid before you. Real freedom isn't just about choosing. It's about knowing what you're allowed to choose from in the first place. Imagine believing that your ability to say no is proof of strength, evidence of willpower, integrity, or discipline. But what if that refusal wasn't control at all? What if your brain simply never generated the urge to say yes in the first place? Neuroscience suggests inhibition isn't always victory. It might just be absence. You didn't eat the cake. You declined the invitation. You skipped the risk. But was there truly a struggle? Or was there simply no desire to begin with? Studies show the brain's inhibitory circuits don't activate without opposing impulses. Without temptation, resistance becomes automatic. You think you chose restraint, but there may have been nothing to resist. Some people beam with pride for self-control, unaware their neural wiring makes the craving faint or non-existent. Others wage silent wars against overwhelming impulses every day. Is one morally superior or just neurologically different? This illusion distorts how we judge others and ourselves. We praise control without asking if control was needed. We shame weakness in those whose brains scream louder. Your virtue might be less about triumph and more about never having the same battle. True awareness begins when you ask not only what you said no to, but whether you ever had to say no at all. Control is not always conquest. Sometimes it's just quiet. And sometimes quiet isn't mastery. It's the absence of a storm you never had to weather. Imagine a feather falling in a storm. It flutters, it shifts, it dances in the wind. and yet it never truly chooses where to land. That feather is your will. It feels sacred, luminous, free. But it's featherlight against the gravity of biology, history, trauma, and time. We grow up believing our choices define us. But what if our choices were already narrowed by forces we couldn't see? Your DNA encodes patterns: how quickly you react, how deeply you fear, how easily you trust. Childhood trauma rewires the nervous system, making you flinch at peace and feel safe in chaos. Culture paints ideals into your mind: what success means, who you should love, what's worth chasing. History whispers survival strategies passed down like scars: stay small, avoid risk, don't speak first. Neuroscience shows decisions often arise before we're aware, milliseconds earlier in the limbic system, while the conscious brain just builds a story to explain it. You still choose, but only from what your biology permits, your trauma didn't censor, and your culture handed you. Even rebellion is often repetition in disguise. You might leave your family's belief system, only to worship freedom with the same rigidity. You think you're escaping, but you're just choosing a new storm pattern. So when you whisper, "This was my will," ask, who wrote the winds? Who chose the altitude? Who carved the weight into your feather? Your soul is real. But in the face of ancestral pull, neurotransmitters, and social gravity, it floats more than it flies. And maybe its beauty isn't in commanding the storm, but in learning to tilt ever so slightly toward healing within it. To be a feather doesn't mean weakness. It means survival through surrender, through grace inside forces too vast to hold. Imagine standing in front of a blank canvas, brush in hand, ready to paint your life. Every stroke feels like freedom. Every color feels like choice. But what if the canvas isn't blank at all? What if beneath the surface, invisible ink sketches a shape you never chose, lines drawn by genetics, childhood, trauma, culture, and memory? This is the decision geometry trap. You believe you're creating something original, but your hand follows outlines you can't see. Neuroscientific studies reveal that many of our decisions are driven by unconscious patterns. The amygdala reacts before the cortex can reason. Your nervous system leaps before your logic can breathe. What looks like creativity is often constraint you've normalized without ever seeing. Think of how you respond under pressure. Do you avoid conflict, chase approval, or freeze in fear? These reactions feel like your personality, but they're survival strategies encoded into your biology long before you had language. Repetition strengthens these circuits. The more you act within the same structure, the more it feels like home, even if that home was built on anxiety, trauma, or silent rules passed down through generations. And so, you choose partners like the ones who hurt or saved you. You pursue goals that mirror the validation you were once denied. You form opinions that fit inside the frameworks inherited from family, religion, or culture. You follow the map, not realizing it was drawn with the ink of others' fears, hopes, and expectations. You think you're free because the lines are invisible, but that's what makes them powerful. True freedom isn't just painting, it's seeing the blueprint underneath. It's tracing the faint geometry shaping your will, and asking, whose lines are these, and do I dare erase them to draw something of my own? Imagine an impulse to act sparking in your brain before you're even aware of it. Neuroscience reveals that decisions often begin unconsciously, with neural activity firing milliseconds ahead of conscious recognition. This means your sense of authorship over your choices is more an illusion than reality. Your decision is not the origin of action, but the mind catching up with what your brain already set in motion. Experiments like Benjamin Libet's have shown that readiness potentials, the electrical signals preparing movement, occur before you consciously decide to move. Psychology explains this as a form of retrospective awareness, where the conscious mind stitches together an experience of choice after the fact. This thought before thought phenomenon suggests free will is less about initiating actions and more about recognizing them. It's as if your mind watches a play already in progress, claiming the script as its own. Understanding this rewires how we see autonomy, not as absolute control, but as the interplay between unconscious impulses and conscious awareness. This insight invites you to explore where true agency lies, between the thought before thought and the moment you become aware. Imagine making a huge life decision, quitting the job, ending the relationship, leaving the city, and feeling like you've taken control. But what if it wasn't about what you were choosing, but what you were avoiding? This is the abyss reflection trick, when your biggest choices are just elegant escapes from fear. Psychology shows that the brain is far more motivated to avoid pain than to seek pleasure. You might think you're chasing happiness, but often you're fleeing discomfort, trauma, shame, failure, or rejection. The move looks brave, but under the surface, it's fear with a mask on. Consider someone who pursues independence not out of self-love, but because relying on others once led to heartbreak. Or someone who constantly changes careers, not from exploration, but from the terror of being seen as inadequate. The surface says freedom. The roots say fear. Neuroscience confirms this too. Our decision-making regions are wired to prioritize threat detection. We choose fast, reactively, under stress, and when we do, our so-called freedom might just be a reflex. That doesn't mean every escape is wrong. Sometimes fleeing is survival, but true freedom begins with awareness. Ask yourself, am I moving towards something I love, or just running from something I hate? One leads to growth, the other to repetition. To be free, you have to face the abyss. Only then can your choices be yours, not fears. Imagine believing your mind is a vast, open library where you can access every memory, every motive, every truth to make free decisions. But neuroscience reveals something else. Your brain is a filter, not a window. It hides files it thinks you can't handle, redacts truths it finds too dangerous, and leaves you navigating a curated version of reality. When trauma hits or shame becomes unbearable, the brain doesn't delete, it suppresses. Key memories, insights, or emotional truths get sealed behind neural defenses. You go on living, unaware that vital data is missing. But those hidden files still whisper. They shape your preferences, fears, and reactions. You flinch without knowing why. You sabotage goals and call it fate. Psychological studies on repression and dissociation show that the mind often protects itself by limiting access. You're not weak. You're being shielded from your own past. And if you're not aware of what's been hidden, how free are your choices? How accurate are your perceptions? You may think you're deciding consciously, but in reality, you're navigating blind spots your brain quietly created. The scariest truths aren't always outside us. They're locked inside, out of reach, and yet they guide us, invisibly. True freedom doesn't begin with knowing what you want. It begins with questioning what you were never allowed to see. You're not free if your mind decides what truths you're ready for. You're just living inside what your brain lets you remember. Imagine walking into a dim room, music thumping, your stomach empty. In that moment, your brain doesn't just perceive, it recalibrates. Your preferences, impulses, even your morality subtly shift. This is the decision-dimming switch. Your will is not a fixed beam. It's a flickering bulb wired into your biology. Studies show that lighting affects risk-taking. People in dim spaces make bolder, less rational choices. Hunger alters how much we spend, whom we trust, even how we judge fairness. Noise disrupts prefrontal cortex function, pushing us toward instinct over reasoning. One fMRI study revealed that background chaos reduces activation in brain regions responsible for long-term planning. Your environment is a sculptor, quietly chiseling your decisions while you believe you're choosing freely. Judges hand out harsher sentences right before lunch. People sitting near messy desks are more likely to cheat. A scent, a temperature drop, even the color of the walls can nudge the needle of choice. Digital light is no different. Interfaces, notifications, and visual contrast exploit neural shortcuts to guide behavior without permission. And your mood, it's biochemical. Low serotonin or high cortisol doesn't feel like a puppet string, but it is. So how stable is willpower if it bends to lighting, hunger, sound? If a sandwich or a playlist can shift your ethics, how free is your freedom? We are not the origin of many of our choices. We are interpreters, post-rationalizing reactions shaped by sensory bias and unseen neural tweaks. So next time you act, pause. Look around. The room may be deciding more than you are, and the dimmer switch, it might already be set before you ever reach the wall. Cals, imagine believing you're in control. Your choices sharp, deliberate, conscious. You order the salad instead of the fries, walk away from the deal, choose red over blue. But science keeps whispering another truth. Your choices are not as free as they feel. In fact, psychology, neuroscience, and even marketing show just how easily you can be nudged, steered, even predicted. Behavioral economics calls them nudges. Small changes in context that lead to massive shifts in behavior. Place healthier foods at eye level and sales rise. Frame an option as a default, and people choose it overwhelmingly. These aren't guesses, they're repeatable outcomes, predictable, replicable, proven. Neuroscience goes deeper. Brain scans show activity building toward a decision seconds before you're even aware you've made a choice. The illusion of free will is maintained by a post-rationalizing mind, stitching a story after the action has already begun. The choice wasn't created by you, it was discovered by your awareness, late to its own party. Even your preferences aren't as stable as they seem. Studies reveal how colors, fonts, lighting, music, or phrasing can sway judgments, emotions, and purchases without your awareness. Marketing thrives on this predictability. Algorithms don't guess who you are, they calculate it. And once your patterns are mapped, your freedom becomes a series of highly probable reactions that you mistake for spontaneous decisions. So, if your decisions can be shaped, timed, and forecast like weather, what does that say about choice? Maybe free will isn't gone, but in the age of influence, where even your impulses are engineered, we must ask, is it still truly ours, or just what's left after the push? Imagine saying yes to someone, believing your choice came from pure love. But pause, was it really love, or was it guilt, ego, or pity reflecting back at you like a distorted mirror? Psychological research shows our motives are often tangled, layered with unconscious influences we barely recognize. Neuroscience reveals how emotional centers in the brain, like the amygdala and limbic system, can hijack decisions, coloring them with impulses rooted in fear, obligation, or self-interest. Sometimes what feels like a heartfelt yes is actually a response shaped by social conditioning or a need to avoid conflict. Motivations aren't always transparent. They hide beneath the surface of conscious awareness, making the choices we claim to own a complex blend of true desire and subconscious forces. This mirror of motives challenges the notion of pure free will, revealing that our choice might be more about responding to internal and external pressures than authentic agency. Recognizing this hidden complexity invites deeper self-reflection, helping us untangle genuine intentions from the echoes of past programming and societal expectations. Only then can we begin to choose with clearer eyes and freer hearts. Imagine moving so fast through life, job, goals, routines, that you forget when you last stopped to ask why. You think it's willpower or ambition pushing you forward. But psychology reveals something else, the fire of momentum. You keep going not because you choose to, but because stopping feels harder than continuing. Inertia isn't just physics, it's mental. Once your life starts rolling in a direction, even if it no longer fits who you are, it's easier to keep moving than to confront the disruption of stopping. Neuroscience shows that well-worn neural pathways favor repetition. Your brain rewards efficiency, not reflection. So you keep the job, maintain the relationship, pursue the goal, not out of passion, but because the system you've built doesn't know how to pause. Think of someone staying in a high-paying job they hate. Quitting means uncertainty, questions, reinvention. Momentum says, stay. it's safer. Or someone pursuing a dream long abandoned only because they've already come so far. That's not freedom. It's drift disguised as direction. Stopping takes more courage than continuing. It requires discomfort, silence, honesty. But in that stillness, you rediscover choice. You remember why you began, or realize it's time to begin again. Momentum may carry you far, but only stillness can show if you're going where you truly want to go. Imagine thinking your choices are rooted in values, clarity, and reason. But what if most were just ancient biological demands in disguise? Neuroscience and evolutionary psychology reveal a sobering truth. Much of what you call decision is your body whispering survival instructions, and your mind scrambling to justify them. You skipped the party, you stayed silent, you reached out, you pulled back. But behind each move, your body had already cast its vote. It needed rest, food, sex, or safety, and you followed. Later, you gave it a narrative. I didn't feel like it, or it just made sense. But the urge came first. The logic came after. Circadian rhythms, hormone surges, blood sugar dips. These biological signals drive mood, desire, and even courage. What feels like a personal value might just be low serotonin. What seems like wisdom might just be exhaustion. You're not analyzing, you're obeying, and then explaining the obedience with clever words. We're taught that willpower rules the mind. But often, it's biology that writes the script. The craving for connection, the impulse to withdraw, the sudden burst of confidence. These aren't always conscious choices. They're primitive survival commands wearing the mask of personality. Real freedom doesn't begin with acting on impulse or resisting it. It starts when you catch the override in progress. When you ask, is this me choosing, or just my body demanding something ancient? Until then, you're not making choices. You're narrating instinct. Imagine doing the same thing every morning. Same route, same coffee, same thoughts. It feels comforting, almost sacred. But what if it's not choice, it's choreography? This is the ritual repetition trick. You repeat patterns not out of love, but out of ritual. The loop feels right not because it's true, but because it's familiar. Neuroscience shows that repetition physically strengthens neural circuits. Each time you act the same way, you deepen that path in your brain. It becomes easier to do what you've done before, regardless of whether it serves you. This is why people return to old lovers, toxic habits, or lifelong roles that shrink them. The brain mistakes structure for safety. Even anxiety can feel like home if it matches what you've always known. Behavioral psychology calls it operant conditioning. But here, the reward is not happiness. The reward is predictability. You were trained by chaos to find comfort in repetition. Childhood taught you which behaviors were safe. Trauma taught you what to expect. Society taught you what to perform. And now, your routines are echoes. The job you tolerate, the partner you fix, the silence you accept, they might be less about desire, more about neurological momentum. You think you're choosing freely. But look closely. Are you writing a new chapter or tracing old handwriting? The ritual soothes you, but it can also erase you. Comfort isn't always clarity. It can be camouflage. So next time you feel right about a choice, pause. Ask, is this love or is it loyalty to a loop? And if you feel peace, dig deeper. Was it peace or just the quiet hum of a pattern too old to question? Imagine walking into a room and instantly adjusting. You smile more, stand taller, speak differently. You're not lying. You're just presenting the version of yourself that fits. But something strange happens. The more you perform that version, the more you believe it. Eventually, you forget it's a performance at all. You become the character. This is the broadcast self effect. Psychologists describe the self as a narrative, something constructed, not discovered. From a young age, you learn what gets praised, what's acceptable, what feels safe. You broadcast that version to the world again and again until it hardens into identity. You aren't just acting confident. You start to feel that confidence is who you are, even if, underneath, you're still uncertain or afraid. Neuroscience shows that repeated behavior strengthens neural pathways. Presenting the same traits over time wires your brain to believe them. Social feedback reinforces it. You say, "I'm fine," often enough, and your mind stops looking deeper. Your self-image becomes a mask worn so long it fuses with your face. You become your broadcast, not out of deception, but repetition. But here's the trap. When your life is built on the broadcast self, freedom shrinks. You feel pressure to maintain the role. You fear breaking character, even when you're alone. Your choices narrow. You begin to think, feel, and decide within the boundaries of that role, believing its authenticity, when it's really a performance that never ends. True freedom means recognizing the gap between the role and the raw self. It means stepping off the stage, peeling off the costume, even when it feels like skin, and daring to ask, if I wasn't performing for anyone, not friends, not family, not even myself, who would I really be? Imagine making a choice, believing it's yours alone. But what if that decision shifted because someone was watching? Social psychology reveals that visibility profoundly edits willpower, as the presence of an audience filters our behavior. Known as the audience filter bias, this phenomenon means your choices often adapt to expectations, judgments, or social norms when under observation. Studies show people perform differently, sometimes better, sometimes worse, when others watch, prioritizing image over authenticity. The brain's social circuits heighten self-awareness and fear of rejection, leading you to act not as your true self, but as the version you think others want to see. This performance overrides genuine desire, masking true intentions with rehearsed behaviors. Your free will becomes filtered through the lens of social approval, making autonomy conditional rather than absolute. The awareness of being seen becomes a powerful force shaping your actions, subtly redirecting willpower to fit external narratives. Recognizing the audience filter bias frees you to question when your choices are authentic and when they're a curated performance. True freedom lies in peeling back this filter, reclaiming decisions from the watchful gaze and stepping into unfiltered selfhood. Imagine being in a moment of crisis, your heart racing, thoughts swirling, and you're forced to decide. You think you have options, but your brain has already filtered most of them out. This is the alarmed brain decision, when fear disguises itself as urgency and stress shrinks your world to only two panic-shaped choices. Neuroscience shows that when we're under stress, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, hijacks decision-making. Cortisol floods your system, narrowing attention and muting the prefrontal cortex, which handles complex reasoning. In that state, you don't explore possibilities, you react. You don't choose wisely, you pick the fastest escape. You're not assessing calmly, you're fighting imagined tigers. That's why arguments escalate, jobs are quit impulsively, and bridges are burned. The brain in alarm mode thinks in black and white, yes or no, stay or run, silence or scream. Consider someone stuck in burnout. They don't evaluate rest, boundaries, or delegation. They just quit or collapse. Or someone in a relationship fight. They say something irreversible, not because they mean it, but because stress shrunk their vision. The trick isn't to fight the alarm, but to notice it. If your choices feel extreme, if the pressure says now or never, pause. That voice isn't wisdom, it's survival instinct. Breathe, wait for clarity, because real decisions aren't born in panic, they're born in peace. Imagine thinking you chose silence, to be kind, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, but neuroscience shows something deeper. Your body had already reacted before your mind formed a thought. The freeze, the fawn, the subtle nod. These aren't choices. They're survival mechanisms, ancient instincts firing faster than reason. When your brain senses threat, criticism, rejection, tension, it hands control to your nervous system. That system doesn't wait. It freezes you, or makes you appease long before you think. You call it people-pleasing. You say, I didn't want drama. But truthfully, your biology was screaming one command: survive. Think of when you said, no problem, while your gut twisted, or when you smiled through discomfort. Your brain built explanations later, justifying a reaction it never initiated. You thought you were choosing peace, but you were enacting a reflex. Your body flinched first. Your mind just wrote the script. Trauma research confirms it. Many who identify as agreeable or quiet are actually stuck in fawn or freeze. Not because they lack opinion, but because their system learned early that safety came from silence, from pleasing, from disappearing. And here's the shift. You didn't fail to speak up. Your body protected you the best way it knew, but survival responses aren't truth. They're defense. Real freedom begins when you stop mistaking protection for personality and start reclaiming your voice from the reflexes that once had to keep you safe. Imagine sitting alone, and suddenly a thought flashes through your mind, a violent urge, a bizarre fantasy, a memory that doesn't feel like yours. You didn't summon it, you didn't want it, yet there it is. This is the alien thought problem. What if some thoughts don't come from you? What if they rise from unknown chambers of the mind or something deeper, stranger? Neuroscience tells us that only a fraction of brain activity reaches conscious awareness. The rest, memories, associations, fears, move in shadow, firing unpredictably. Intrusive thoughts are universal. Even the most stable minds report flashes of horror or absurdity, not because they're broken, but because the brain is chaotic. But sometimes, the thought doesn't just feel wrong, it feels foreign. Like it doesn't match your values, your memories, your voice. Psychologists call this ego-dystonic thinking. When thoughts contradict the self-image so much, they feel alien. In trauma theory, it can be a fragmented echo, a frozen memory emerging as a flash of threat. Spiritual traditions interpret these moments as signs, spirits, or channeling. Some cultures even teach that not all thoughts are yours to begin with. Modern theories suggest that thoughts can be neural noise triggered by invisible stimuli, a sound, a scent, a micro-expression. Your brain may register danger before you even enter the moment. You think your mind is a solo narrator, but it's more like a crowded theater. Voices rise, memories shout, instincts interrupt. So when a thought feels out of place, it may not be a flaw. It might be a flare from a part of you still unspoken. The question isn't, why did I think that? It's, what part of me needed to speak through that thought? Imagine you have an idea, a sudden craving, a decision, a belief that feels like it came from you. You trust it, you follow it. But pause. Where did it truly come from? A glance, a headline, a single word dropped in casual conversation? You may not notice it, but your mind is full of echoes. This is the genie of suggestion. Psychologists have shown that human thoughts are highly suggestible. A subtle cue, a color, a tone of voice, a smell can trigger an entire chain of action without conscious awareness. Studies prove that people exposed to the word old in a scrambled sentence walk slower afterward. Just seeing someone yawn makes you feel tired. That's not magic. That's neural mimicry. That's the genie at work. Advertisers, marketers, politicians, they don't need to convince you. They only need to implant. Once an idea is seeded, your brain does the rest. It reconstructs the memory, assigns emotion, and frames the thought as if it were born inside you. Suddenly, a brand becomes a preference. A fear becomes a belief. A random image becomes a need. You act on it, never knowing it wasn't originally yours. Neuroscience confirms that the brain's default state is absorption. Mirror neurons, priming effects, unconscious recall. Your thoughts are shaped by what surrounds you long before you consciously engage. You're not just observing the world, you're absorbing it. And once suggestion takes root, it blooms unnoticed, masquerading as intuition, even truth. So the next time you feel sure of a choice, a desire, a judgment, ask, was that truly mine? Or did the genie already whisper it long before I called it my own? Real awareness begins when you question the authorship of your thoughts. Imagine your every action shaped by what others expect from you. You act, they respond, and you adjust again, caught in a continuous cycle. This is the feedback loop of self, where your sense of freedom is less about authentic choice and more about negotiating your self-image through others' reactions. Social psychology shows how human behavior is deeply influenced by social feedback, with mirror neurons and empathy wiring us to anticipate and mimic responses. Your identity becomes a dynamic negotiation, constantly reshaped by approval, judgment, or rejection. This loop creates a powerful illusion of control, as you believe your choices are your own, but they are often reactions to external cues. Neuroscience reveals that this loop operates partly outside conscious awareness, embedding social patterns in your brain's circuitry. Your freedom exists within this dance, less a fixed point of autonomy, more a fluid process of self-adaptation. Recognizing the feedback loop of self invites deeper reflection on how much your actions serve true desire versus social expectation. Breaking free requires awareness and courage to step beyond this loop, reclaiming agency beyond the ever-shifting mirror of others. Imagine being magnetically pulled towards someone, a career, or a pattern that feels intense, familiar even. You tell yourself it's chemistry or purpose, but what if it's your nervous system scanning for unresolved trauma? This is the trauma repair agenda, when what feels like a choice is actually your body trying to rewrite old pain. Neuroscience shows that trauma imprints on the brain and body, especially when experienced early. These imprints shape what feels normal, even if it's unsafe. Your system seeks resolution by recreating the original wound, hoping this time things will end differently. Psychologists call this repetition compulsion, the unconscious need to revisit hurtful dynamics, not to suffer, but to fix. You might chase validation from emotionally distant people because that mirrors a parent who withheld love, or push yourself in high-pressure roles, trying to earn the worth no one affirmed in childhood. These patterns don't start from conscious desire. They begin as survival blueprints. It feels like choice, but it's often reflex. The pull toward the familiar isn't freedom. It's unfinished business. The healing starts when you recognize the script. Ask yourself, am I drawn to this because I want it, or because I needed it long ago and never got it? True healing doesn't come from reenacting the past. It comes from choosing differently, giving yourself what you once needed through awareness, boundaries, and compassion. Imagine chasing something again, an old love, a faded dream, a familiar grudge. You tell yourself it's unfinished, unresolved, still worth it. But psychology whispers another truth. You're not choosing it because it's right. You're choosing it because it's familiar. You've burned yourself there before, and you know how that flame feels. The brain is addicted to the known. When life becomes uncertain, it seeks emotional patterns already etched into your nervous system. Nostalgia, regret, even pain, if practiced enough, become comfortable. You relight the same emotional candle, not because it warms you, but because you fear the dark more than the burn. You revisit people who once hurt you. You chase ambitions that once drained you. You replay arguments in your mind, rewriting outcomes that never happened. This isn't passion, it's ritual. Neuroscience shows our minds default to repetition over risk. We cling to the past, not because it serves us, but because it's mapped, predictable, safe. And yet, this looping is a trap. It feels like resolution, but it's just inertia. Memory seduces you with the illusion of movement, while secretly holding you in place. You're not moving forward, you're orbiting. Real growth asks a harder question. Am I choosing this because it's meaningful, or just because it's mapped? Sometimes, wisdom means letting the old candle burn out, and instead of reigniting what once was, daring, just once, to sit in the dark long enough to discover what else might glow. Imagine standing at a crossroads, not torn by belief, but pulled by a strange urge to just see what happens. You don't want one path more than the other. You just want to know. This is the experimental outcome bias. You think you made a decision, but what you really obeyed was curiosity, not conviction. We often mistake exploratory behavior for agency. But decisions driven by the need to observe aren't commitments, they're tests. Cognitive science suggests that our brains crave prediction. When the outcome is uncertain, the brain activates dopamine systems, not to reward success, but to explore novelty. It's why we enter relationships we're unsure about, take risks we don't endorse, or say things just to watch the reaction. It's not always impulse. It's data collection. You wanted a result more than a reality. You wanted to know what a yes would feel like, not necessarily to live with it. That's why so many of our choices end with confusion. Because we never truly chose, we just pressed a button labeled, "Surprise me." Curiosity is powerful, but it masquerades as choice. You may sleep next to someone, move to a city, or quit a job not from desire, but from an unconscious experiment. And once the result arrives, pain, joy, chaos, you often say, "I should have known better." But knowing wasn't the point. Feeling was. Curiosity overrides value judgment. The decision wasn't rational, it was experimental. You didn't choose the path for where it led. You chose it because it wasn't labeled yet. So was it truly a decision, or a diagnostic tool disguised as choice? Next time you're about to leap, ask, "Do I want to live this, or just learn what it feels like to fall?" Imagine waking up every day chasing a goal, striving for something you believe matters: success, security, legacy. But stop for a moment. Where did that dream come from? Was it born from your own desire, or is it a ghost you inherited? A father's unfinished dream, a mother's quiet suffering. The legacy burden reflex means you may be living out someone else's story, not your own. From childhood, we absorb more than rules. We absorb longings, disappointments, and generational fear. A father who never felt respected might raise a child to chase status. A mother who lived with scarcity might teach a daughter that safety lies in control. These lessons aren't spoken. They're embodied, felt, passed down like heirlooms, sealed in memory, and carried like invisible weights. Psychologists call this transgenerational transmission, the inheritance of unspoken emotional burdens. Neuroscience shows that trauma, especially unresolved, can alter not only behavior, but gene expression, priming children to react to dangers that were never theirs. And so, you march forward, thinking it's your ambition. But you're really answering echoes. Your drive is not always your own. It's a reflex formed in someone else's storm. You become the caretaker of ancestral grief, chasing dreams that soothed someone else's wounds. The job, the marriage, the beliefs, they feel like choice. But they're reflexes. Inherited scripts written in fear, obligation, and love. And breaking them feels like betrayal, even when it's salvation. You hesitate not because the dream is wrong, but because it feels disloyal to let it go. So ask yourself, is the life you're building truly yours, or just the safest path someone else dreamed for you? Real freedom begins the moment you stop carrying dreams that never belong to you, and the path you choose after that one might finally be yours. Imagine every atom in your body as the outcome of countless cosmic lotteries, each a chance, a roll of the dice that shaped you before you even existed. Before you made any decision, billions of random events aligned perfectly to form the unique you. This astonishing probability means that your very existence is a product of immense chance, not predetermined design. Quantum physics shows that at the smallest scales, randomness governs reality. And every choice you perceive is layered atop this chaotic foundation. You are, in essence, randomness with opinions, a complex pattern born from the chaotic dance of particles and probabilities. This challenges the idea of absolute control or free will, suggesting instead that your sense of self is a fragile arrangement of chance and order. Understanding this probability of you invites awe and humility, reminding us that freedom is framed within the unpredictable unfolding of the universe. Your decisions, desires, and beliefs emerge not just from choice, but from the improbable miracle of being here at all, a beautiful, chaotic convergence of chance shaped into conscious life. Imagine making a choice, trusting someone, ending something, chasing a goal, and feeling confident it's the right call. But here's the unsettling truth. Your will depends on memory, and memory is unreliable. This is the memory-warped will. You're acting on reflections that have been bent by time, emotion, and perception, yet you treat them as fact. Neuroscience shows memory is not a perfect recording. Each time you recall an event, your brain reconstructs it, altered subtly by your current mood, beliefs, and biases. Over time, these reconstructions become distorted truths, guiding your decisions without you realizing it. That clear memory you rely on, it might be part fiction, yet it drives your real choices. Psychologists call this the misinformation effect. Even deeply held memories can be edited or implanted through suggestion. So when you avoid risk because you remember failing, or chase love because you remember how good it once felt, those choices may be rooted in warped history. Consider someone who avoids public speaking due to a memory of humiliation, but the event never happened the way they recall, or someone who keeps forgiving toxicity because their memory filters out the worst moments. This doesn't mean your will isn't real, but it's shaped by flawed material. True freedom comes when you pause and ask, is this decision built on truth or just on a memory that feels true? Only then can your will become conscious, not just conditioned. Imagine forgetting what you meant to do, why you opened that app, walked into that room, or paused mid-sentence. You blame distraction, a lapse, a slip. But what if it wasn't forgetting at all? What if there was never a real decision, just a blank space your brain tried to cover? This is the file not found effect. The mind hates gaps. So when you reach for a memory that doesn't exist because no choice was made, no plan was formed, your brain invents one. It fills the silence with a story. It pretends there was an intention, wraps it in a familiar feeling, and feeds it to your consciousness as truth. Cognitive science shows that memory is reconstruction, not playback. Especially with small or habitual actions, the brain often inserts intent retroactively, fabricating decisions to create coherence. That moment you forgot what you were about to say, maybe the thought never finished. Your brain just wrote an ending to avoid admitting the absence. This illusion comforts us. We prefer to believe we're always steering, that even missed steps began with intention. But many choices we recall are just noise, misfires, half signals, mental static. The decision never happened. The mind simply can't tolerate a blank, so it scribbles and moves on. True awareness means noticing these fabrications. Not every forgotten thought was real. Some were ghosts born in the quiet. To reclaim clarity, you must accept that your brain lies to keep you stable and learn to question what it claims you meant to do. Imagine being struck by a craving, an object, a person, an idea, and before you understand it, you're already chasing it. Desire doesn't ask for permission. It arrives like a hook in the brain, bypassing logic and embedding itself in your nervous system. This is the hooked desire theory. You think you choose what you want, but in truth, the wanting chooses you. Neuroscience shows that dopamine spikes not after a decision, but just before you even realize you're leaning toward it. The brain rewards pursuit more than possession. It craves motion, not arrival. Evolution shaped us to desire first and justify later. Desire kept us alive, food, mates, shelter. But now, it targets anything with a shine, validation, risk, narrative. You scroll through strangers' lives and feel the tug, not because you decided to care, but because something in you latched on. And then the mind catches up. It invents reasons, stories, philosophies for why this particular thing matters. This is post hoc justification, an illusion of authorship. We don't write the story of desire, we translate it. People defend irrational relationships, chase unwise careers, fall into addictions not because they made a decision, but because they felt the hook. And once hooked, they need to believe they meant to be, because that illusion protects the ego. But explanation isn't authorship, it's myth-making. The plot began long before the narrator arrived, so next time you feel a sudden fire for someone or something, pause. Ask, did I choose this desire, or am I just explaining the direction I was already pulled? Maybe you didn't light the fire. Maybe you're just trying to narrate the burn. Imagine moving through your day, showering, commuting, answering emails, smiling at strangers. You perform it all seamlessly, but something's missing. You weren't really there. The body acted, the mouth spoke, but the mind just observed. This is the sleepwalking consent, the unsettling truth that most of life is lived without conscious presence. Neuroscience shows that up to 95% of our behavior is automatic. Habits, scripts, routines, executed by systems deep in the brain, not the thinking self. You don't choose how you tie your shoes or respond with, "I'm good," when someone asks how you are. These actions are pre-written, stored in procedural memory, running while your awareness floats nearby, a passive passenger in its own vessel. Psychologists call this dissociation light, a subtle disconnection from self, where we drift through the motions of life while our conscious attention flickers like a weak signal. You scroll through social media, eat meals, complete tasks, all while your inner narrator quietly watches, detached. The world sees you participating, but inside, you feel like a witness to your own life, as if your soul forgot to show up. And this isn't rare. It's the default. The brain craves efficiency. Conscious thought is expensive, slow, so it delegates. And we comply. We say yes. We nod. We promise. We live, not by intention, but by momentum. One foot in front of the other, never questioning if the path is even ours. And then we wonder why we feel hollow, lost, numb. Why days pass and nothing lingers. So ask yourself, when was the last time you acted with full awareness, not just physically present but fully alive inside the moment? If your life has been moving without you, who's been consenting on your behalf? And what would it mean to finally take the wheel, to stop drifting, and wake up into your own life? Imagine feeling a sudden impulse or decision that doesn't quite feel like your own, an unfamiliar force guiding your choices from within. What if that sensation isn't mere imagination, but a hint that free will might not be purely human? Some theories in neuroscience and philosophy suggest that the self is not a singular entity, but a complex system of competing processes, sometimes experienced as other. This fragmentation can feel like an alien will acting through you, a separate agent influencing decisions beyond conscious control. Psychologists recognize phenomena like dissociation and split consciousness, where parts of the mind operate independently, challenging the unity of free will. Moreover, some speculate that consciousness might tap into something beyond biological wiring, an external or cosmic influence shaping human thought. This alien will possibility invites us to reconsider what free will truly means. It might not be a personal, human-only power, but a layered phenomenon involving unknown forces or dimensions. If free will is shared with or influenced by something other, then understanding and integrating this alien will could unlock new levels of self-awareness and agency beyond the familiar boundaries of mind. Imagine thinking you're forging your path, making choices, building a future, when in reality, you're just remembering steps already taken. This is the preloaded script life, the eerie philosophical idea that your life has already played out, and what feels like decision-making is just slow recollection. Some interpretations of time in physics and ancient philosophy suggest the future isn't ahead. It's already here, layered with the past and present. Your consciousness flips through the pages of a story already written, line by line. What you call intuition might be memory. What you call choice might be recognition. Déjà vu, often dismissed as a brain glitch, could be a crack in the illusion, a moment when the remembering leaks faster than usual. Quantum physics only deepens the mystery. In delayed choice experiments, particles seem to retroactively change behavior based on future measurement. Cause and effect blur. Time doesn't move forward, it folds. This perspective isn't about helplessness, it's about awareness. If your life is a script, then your power lies in how deeply you read it, not just reacting to each scene, but asking, why this line? Why now? Are your choices truly new, or echoes of something you've already known, deep down. Perhaps you aren't shaping your story. You're just remembering how it always ends. Imagine making a decision: where to go, what to say, who to trust, believing it's fresh, objective, rooted in logic. But before the first thought even formed, something older had already tugged at your mind. Psychology calls it the anchor bias, your brain's habit of clinging to the first information it encounters, no matter how flawed. You compare your job to your last one, your relationship to the one that broke you, your self-worth to a comment from childhood. But were those anchors accurate? Or were they distortions, emotionally charged, misunderstood, or outright untrue? And yet your brain still measures from them, using warped baselines to steer present decisions. It's not just numbers, it's identity. A childhood failure becomes the ceiling on your ambition. A compliment from someone toxic becomes the gold standard. The bias makes your choices feel grounded, when really, they're drifting in orbit around an unreliable past. Your intuition? Often just momentum from a misjudged reference point. Your caution? Maybe just fear wrapped in the familiar logic of comparison. You're not choosing in the present. You're reacting through a lens shaped by moments that don't deserve that power anymore. Freedom begins when you stop asking, "What does this remind me of?" and start asking, "What if the original measurement was wrong?" Because only then do you stop dragging anchors behind you and start steering by stars that are real. Imagine standing still, yet everything around you is spinning. Culture, parents, memories, hormones, fears, fashion, pain. And in that storm, you make a choice. You think it's yours, but is it? This is the cyclone of influence. You choose inside a storm, then call the spin your own wind. Neuroscience and psychology agree what we call free will is often a filtered reaction to forces we rarely recognize. From birth, your brain is shaped by language, belief systems, gender norms, media exposure, and childhood wounds. Even what you find beautiful, or terrifying, or important isn't born inside you. It's absorbed. Hormones shift your risk tolerance. Pain hardens preferences. Social groups define what's acceptable to want. You don't choose from a blank page. You choose from a menu handed to you by invisible hands. Even your inner voice may be a patchwork of your mother's worry, your teacher's praise, your society's punishments. You feel certainty, but certainty can be a trance. It feels personal, but it's often patterned. Think about it. Did you really choose your favorite color, your sense of justice, your idea of success? Or were they modeled, rewarded, expected? And when your choice feels deeply you, that feeling might just be the eye of the storm, calm, centered, but still surrounded by winds you didn't control. This doesn't mean you're fake. It means you're human, complex, conditioned, shaped, not scripted, but far from untouched. So the next time you feel confident in your preference or conviction, pause. Ask yourself not, "What do I want?" but, "Who taught me to want this?" Because sometimes the wind isn't yours. You just learn to move with it. Imagine standing at a crossroads, weighing your options, believing deeply that you're choosing freely. Left or right, stay or go, fight or forgive. But what if one of those options was never real? What if the door you didn't choose didn't actually exist? This is the locked path fate, the illusion of choice where no true alternative ever lived. We like to believe our lives are shaped by decisions, but many outcomes are fixed not by our fear or hesitation, but by limitations we never saw. Some paths are invisible because they were never built. They weren't part of our culture, our language, our education, or our emotional wiring. You didn't avoid them. You never knew they were there. Neuroscience shows how limited perception shapes reality. The brain filters billions of inputs down to what's familiar, expected, or reinforced. If an idea doesn't fit your mental model, your mind discards it before you even become aware. You think you weighed every option, but you only ever saw the ones your brain was trained to see. Psychologists call this bounded rationality. We don't make choices from infinite possibility, but from a tiny shelf of available thoughts. And when certain exits were never built, by family, society, language, even time. You can't walk through them. You didn't fail. The door was never there. And what's worse, you believed it was. You didn't miss the chance. You lived in a maze where that turn was never designed. Your identity was shaped not just by what you chose, but by what was silently excluded, possibility edited before perception. So next time you say, "I chose this," pause. Did you? Or was it simply the only path ever lit, the only hallway mapped in your inherited maze? True freedom begins not by walking through doors, but by realizing which ones were never even allowed to exist. Imagine a part of you quietly observing every choice you make, like an internal witness watching the unfolding of your life. Neuroscience and philosophy ask a profound question. If this observer exists within you, then who truly is the chooser? The brain is a complex network of systems, some automatic, some conscious, often acting as separate agents. Studies in psychology reveal that our sense of self is layered, with meta-awareness enabling this internal watcher. But if one part watches while another decides, free will becomes a dialogue between multiple selves rather than a singular act. This fracturing challenges the idea of a unified, autonomous chooser and suggests that decision-making is a dynamic interplay within you. The will that's watching raises a paradox. Can the observer act without becoming the chooser, or is all action already witnessed and filtered through this internal lens? This invites a radical rethink of free will, not as a simple cause, but as a complex, self-reflective process. Recognizing the watcher within offers new insights into consciousness, agency, and the mysteries of choice. Imagine standing in a moment of choice, changing paths, saying yes, walking away, and feeling the weight of decision. But what if that choice wasn't born today? What if it was the echo of something that happened long ago? This is the coin tossed long ago. The haunting idea that what feels like a decision is just the delayed arrival of an outcome already in motion. Neuroscience supports this eerie timeline. Studies like Leibniz show the brain initiates action milliseconds before you're consciously aware. That now moment, it's a notification, not a command. Zoom out further, and life's early experiences, trauma, conditioning, rewards, toss mental coins you never saw flip. By the time you choose, the momentum is already there. You pick safety over risk, not from logic, but because your nervous system remembers chaos. You chase approval, not by desire, but because childhood taught you love was earned. These aren't fresh thoughts, they're ripple effects, and yet you feel the choice as yours. That's the paradox. Consciousness receives decisions like messages, wrapped in the illusion of authorship. But free will may be more about noticing the script than writing it. To reclaim agency, look not just at what you chose, but when the coin was tossed, and who taught you how to call heads or tails. Awareness may not rewind fate, but it lets you meet it with open eyes. Imagine reviewing every decision you've ever made, each yes, each no, each pause, and asking honestly, did I truly choose that? At first, it feels absurd. Of course you did, but as the layers peel back, something quieter and heavier appears. Many of your choices were echoes of fear, habit, childhood scripts, or silent pressures. The decisions were real. The freedom behind them? Maybe not. Neuroscience reveals that choices often happen before awareness kicks in. Your body reacts. Your subconscious signals. Your brain writes the justification afterward. You didn't pick the job. You followed security. You didn't fall silent. You remembered the consequences. You didn't walk away. You feared abandonment. Choice is often a story your mind tells to keep chaos at bay. A beautifully designed illusion, stitched from memories, rewards, and rehearsed roles, like a puppet believing it's dancing freely, unaware of the strings that move its limbs. But the illusion served you. It gave you peace, a sense of authorship, a myth of control that sometimes kept you sane, even alive. And that illusion, for a time, was kind. But awareness, though painful, opens a deeper freedom. When you stop pretending every step was yours alone, you begin to see the machinery, the levers, the inherited scripts, and then, maybe for the first time, you stop moving by default and begin choosing with eyes fully open. That's not comfort. That's liberation. Imagine making a decision and feeling certain it came from your true self. But then pause. Who shaped that self? This is the self that isn't yours. From childhood, you were taught how to speak, what to value, how to behave. Praise sculpted your traits. Punishment carved away the rest. Your preferences were rewarded, your impulses filtered. The result? A version of you that survived the shaping, not necessarily the one that began. Psychologists call this the false self, the mask created to meet external expectations. Over time, it blends so seamlessly with identity that we forget it was ever built. So when you make a choice, is it truly yours, or the echo of someone else's desire wired into you years ago? Even rebellion can be scripted, just a reflex against control, not true freedom. Your style, your tone, your values, how many were inherited from the approval of others? How many were shields you built to survive? The brain doesn't seek truth, it seeks safety. It will adopt any costume that gets applause and delete the parts that provoke rejection. That's why people often wake up in midlife feeling like strangers in their own lives. Because the life was built by a version of them designed to be accepted, not known. You perform, then believe the performance. You choose, but the chooser may be a ghost assembled by teachers, lovers, trauma, and trends. So, if the chooser itself is shaped, who's really behind the wheel? This question isn't meant to break you, but to uncover you, because somewhere beneath the roles and rules, beyond the fear of rejection or need for love, there may be a quiet witness. And maybe that silence, the raw observer beneath all masks, is closer to the real you than any voice that answers. Imagine staring into the sky at night, dreaming of something more meaning, more possibility, more self. In that moment, you feel it, freedom. Not because you control the stars or your fate, but because you can dream beyond them. This is the paradox of will. Maybe free will isn't about having control. Maybe it's about having the ability to imagine you do. Psychologists and neuroscientists agree. Most of what we call choice is driven by unconscious patterns, habits, emotional memory, and environmental cues. You didn't pick your genetics, your childhood, or your first language. You didn't even choose the rules of your mind. And yet, within those limits, something miraculous happens. You dream. You imagine lives you haven't lived. You write scripts for futures that may never come. You envision versions of yourself that don't yet exist, and perhaps never will. And in that act, right there, you experience a freedom deeper than logic. The power to imagine yourself as free, even in a predetermined maze, becomes the spark that rewrites the rules. Neuroscience shows that imagined experiences activate real neural changes. Daydreams alter wiring. Intention reshapes circuitry. The imagined self sends messages to the real one, guiding behavior, bending habit, softening trauma. The illusion becomes infrastructure. So maybe the truth isn't that you are free, but that the belief in freedom gives rise to creativity, to empathy, to courage. Maybe the illusion is the engine. And in pretending we are free, we sometimes stumble into choices that weren't written in any code. The freedom to dream isn't trivial. It's the first rebellion. It's how you reach through the bars, not to escape the cell, but to change the world inside it. Maybe that's where real will begins, not in defiance of fate, but in the act of imagining more than what fate ever offered.